Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Neshnaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavasya Shri Rupam Sagrajata Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhamritasya Namao Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatai Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gautase Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyaiva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So it's an honor and privilege for me to be back with all of you. I believe last time we had discussion of the first canto, something around Parikshit Maharaj, some chapters we had discussed. I was scheduled for the first 4 chapters of this third canto, and because some overlapping of my schedule at last minute because of my Bhakti Vedanta classes got kind of postponed and got overlapped with our scheduled classes, I had to request to excuse myself because it was becoming very difficult. So when Prabhu had asked me, can you do it? So I thought I should purify myself of my mistake of not keeping up with my commitment. Uh, I didn't much pay attention to the subject matter that I have to discuss. And of course, I had an idea what it is. Then I thought, okay, karenge jo bhi hoga dekha jayega. And we're kind of about to get into one of the complicated and technical subject matters, Sarga and Visarga. So before we get started with the discussion, the first four chapters were really sweet and nectarian. There are a lot of stories from Mahabharata, and then 10th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. There are a lot of snippets of what you're going to read in detail in the 10th canto. Before we start, our syllabus is from the 5th chapter up to the 8th chapter. And when I was here last time, the classroom looked little full. Now it looks quite empty. So those of you whose health is not so bad, they can come little in front. Otherwise, everyone has kept their laptop open. God only knows what Leela will go there on the laptop. All right. So if all this facility has been created, so let's work it out. So before we get into this, it's just part of my habit. Bear with me. I'll just like to set a background here of what discussion is going on and why Viduraji is meeting with Maitreya Muni and why this conversation is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'll like to take you through a short journey of how the whole Srimad Bhagavatam began with. We are on the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam begins with the first canto, which has around 19 chapters. And the Srimad Bhagavatam discussion begins at a place called as Naimisharanya, found in Uttar Pradesh even today. A very beautiful place. If you happen to go there, you'll find many, many ashrams, and almost every ashram has some Bhagavad Katha going on. I had the privilege to visit that place 2 years ago. Very beautiful place. And there is that place where this conversation happened, that was said to be the peat where this whole discussion happened. So the conversation began, of the Srimad Bhagavatam starts with the sages of Naimisharanya asking 6 questions to Sutta Goswami. That's your first chapter of first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. What is the ultimate purpose or the ultimate goal of human form of life? Why Krishna took birth, why did he perform his activities, like this, Lila Avatar, Purusha Avatar, etc., etc. And the 6th question was, after Krishna's disappearance, of whom did Dharma took shelter? So this discussion goes up to the first 3 chapters of first canto. And at the end of the 3rd chapter, when the discussion has ended, where the last question, the 6th question, is answered by Sutta Goswami, Krishna Sudham Upagate Jnana, कहते हैं धर्म ज्ञाना, what is that? धर्म ज्ञानाधिविषः कलौ दृष्टा कलौ नष्ट दशामेशा पुराणार्को उदनोतः. So this essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, just like the sun rises in the morning and disappears all the darkness, similarly the Srimad Bhagavatam took birth, and that of what the Dharma took shelter. And that's how the 3rd chapter ends. Now there is an obvious question, Srimad Bhagavatam, how did the Srimad Bhagavatam birth took place? And that forms the basis of your 4th chapter, where Shaunakadi Rishi asked 3 questions. The very first question was the history of Srimad Bhagavatam. What inspired Srila Vyasadeva to compile Srimad Bhagavatam, when already he had written all the literatures or had already compiled in the written format every single Vedic text? So why he had to write Srimad Bhagavatam? Major question was, what was his inspiration? Who inspired him to write at the end of his maturity? Why would he take this endeavor to write 18,000 shlokas again like that? So please describe the history of Srimad Bhagavatam that forms your 4th chapter to the 7th chapter, literally 6th chapter and few first verses of the 7th chapter, where this whole history of Srimad Bhagavatam is described through the conversation of Srila Vyasadeva and Narad Muni. All of you know that story. And there in the 4th chapter, the other 2 questions are asked about Sukdev Goswami, about his birth, about his appearance, and then in what situation, what circumstances he and Parikshit Maharaj met. And when there was a question asked about Sukdev Goswami's meeting with Parikshit, then the 3rd obvious question came. Please describe about the appearance of Parikshit Maharaj, his activities, his rule, and why did he at such a young age? It is described that Parikshit Maharaj was around 60 years old when he left the kingdom. So why at such a young age suddenly Parikshit Maharaj decided to leave everything, go to the forest, or go to the bank of Ganges or Yamuna for that reason, and then wait for 7 days to die? Why the curse happened? Like that was a 3rd question. So the first canto answers these 9 questions. The first 6 questions I answered in the first 3 chapters, and the rest of the 3 questions, 7, 8, and 9th question. 7th is answered for the 4th chapter to the 6th chapter, and then 7th chapter up to the 18th chapter There's a beautiful description, literally whole of major part of Mahabharata is covered there, where Parikshit Maharaja's birth, his activities as a king, his defense of protecting or his attempts to protect his kingdom from the influence of Kali, etc., all is described. Finally, the 19th chapter starts where Sukhdev Goswami enters the scene, where Sutta Goswami enters the last question: in what situation, circumstances Sukhdev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj met? And when this conversation ends, at that point of time, Sutta Goswami said that Parikshit Maharaj, there in that meeting with Sukhdev Goswami, asked a question to Sukhdev Goswami about the duty of a dying person. What should such a person hear? What should he chant? What should he, or whom should he remember? Like that, your first canto ends. And now begins your second canto. Second canto begins with, so when the conversation about or interaction about Parikshit and Sukhdev Goswami was asked about, then the sages said, please describe in detail what all happened. So now what you see from beginning of the second canto, largely a conversation happening between Sukhdev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. Now you don't hear much about Sutta Goswami Shaunakadashi. That will be in between when a question is asked. But largely there's a conversation going on between Parikshit Maharaj and Sukhdev Goswami. Literally, second canto has 10 chapters. If you go through with it, you'll find there are only few verses where Shaunakadi Rishi interjects. And one of the interjections happen at the end of the 10th chapter, with which the third canto begins. And I'll tell you why I'm giving you all this recap, because the subject matter that we're going to discuss from 5th chapter to 8th chapter, I'm going to refer back again and again the second canto, because what has been discussed in second canto is kind of partly being discussed again here in the third canto in our section for today about Sarga and Visarga. So second canto begins with Sukhdev Goswami now answering Parikshit Maharaj. Oh, I should start my video. What, later, right? Okay. So second canto begins with Sukhdev Goswami now answering question of Parikshit Maharaj, and he glorifies Parikshit Maharaj question, Variyan Ishyate Prashna Krataloka Hitam Napaha Atmavis Samataha Pumsam. What a glorious question you have asked. Even I am not glorifying this. Atmavis Samataha Pumsam. All the self-realized souls, they glorify the question that you have asked. And then he began to answer what should be heard, what should be remembered, whom should be remembered, and all that. Actually, he answers that in the very 5th verse of the first chapter. Tasmat Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Smartavyas Cha Ichchatavayam. The question arises, if already Sukhdev Goswami have answered Parikshit Maharaj what should be heard, what should be chanted, and whom you should remember, then why the rest of the discussion, which goes up to the 3rd chapter of second canto, has to happen, right? This first answer, the answer to this question is covered up in the first 3 chapters of second canto. So here, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions, and Prabhupada writes in his purpose also, so Sukhdev Goswami has upfront established that whom you should remember, whom you should chant, whom you should hear about. Yet, he begins to speak about Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga practice for the neophytes. This discussion is something similar, if you want to just kind of remember what's going on. It's something similar to what happens between Arjuna and Krishna. Lord Shri Krishna wanted Arjuna to fight. Because I am ordering it. Yet Lord Shri Krishna spoke about Karma Kanda. And then yet again in the first 6 chapter, Krishna speaks about Jnana Yoga. And again, he speaks about Ashtanga Yoga. Ultimately, he concludes the 6th chapter, Yoginam api sarvesham mad gatinantar atmana. But even if Krishna have concluded at the end of the 6th chapter, 47th verse, time and again in between, again and again, Krishna says, Yagnarthat karmano anitra lokoyam karma bandhana, 3rd chapter, 9th verse, and 3rd chapter, 30th verse, Mai sarvani karmani, everything has to be done for me. Why it was done, the same idea which you see in Bhagavad Gita, which is over here. The difference, little difference was, right now, what Krishna spoke at that point of time was keeping the future generations in mind. There will be all kind of people who would be reading and hearing about this instruction. Same intentions Sukhdev Goswami also had, but right now Sukhdev Goswami was speaking to Parikshit Maharaj, had a huge assembly of sages who had different kinds of understanding what should be the ultimate subject matter. Some were the followers of Karma Kanda, some were Jnana Yoga, others Ashtanga Yoga. Because in the 19th chapter of the first canto, Parikshit Maharaj, before he met Sukhdev Goswami and asked his question, he had asked a similar question to all those sages who had assembled there. And none of them could give him an answer. When he asked the question, all of them started Ishta Goshti. And there was a whole discussion going on. What is that ultimate subject matter to be heard? But when Sukdev Goswami came and everyone accepted Sukdev Goswami to be the leader, and when Parishit Maharaj asked, then Sukdev Goswami gave the conclusion right in the fifth verse of the second canto, first chapter. But thereafter, in the next three chapters, so the first to the third chapter, he speaks about Ashtanga Yoga, Karma Kanda, etc., etc., just to make a comparative study to raise the consciousness of the yogis who are sitting there and for them to establish how Bhakti Yoga is the highest. So, Sukdev Goswami's verdict is you should hear about Krishna, you should chant about Krishna, and you should remember Krishna. Something Krishna says in the same thing like that in the sixth chapter, 47 verse. Yoginam api sarvesham mad gatenantaratmana Shraddhavan bhajate yama same yukta tamo mataha. Or else you can say even in the 10th chapter when Krishna says like this in the similar lines. Point is, I should hear about Krishna. I should remember Krishna. First of all, I should remember Krishna. If I need to remember Krishna, then I need to know more about Krishna, isn't it? And that is how the fourth chapter of second canto begins, where Parishit Maharaj asked a question to Sukdev Goswami. My dear Sukdev Goswami, please narrate more or please tell me more about Lord Shri Krishna. And then he glorifies how Krishna Katha purifies the heart. And then he glorifies hearing Krishna Katha. Krishna is immediately established in the heart of a devotee or the listener. Like that, glorification happens. And then he asks two things. My dear Sukdev Goswami, please tell me every pastime of the Lord in relation to Maya Shakti. Before I get into the subject matter of Lord's pastime through Leela Shakti or the Chit Shakti, which means the 10th canto, the Vrindavan pastime. And tell me about all the interactions of the Lord of the pastime through Maya Shakti, which means Sarga and Visarga. Please tell me how this elemental creation happened, how the secondary creation happened. This discussion happens from the fourth chapter to the seventh chapter, or effectively to the sixth chapter, where Sukdev Goswami to answer about Sarga and Visarga. The originally Sarga Visarga is discussed there, where you would have read about this Virat Roop once more, which you're going to read now again in this discussion also. So there, when this question was asked, Sukdev Goswami quoted the conversation that happened long ago between, whose conversation did he quoted? Anyone remembers? Anyone online would like to answer? Hey, they can speak, and how can I hear them if they want to speak? हरे कृष्णा. सो जो भक्त ऑनलाइन है उनके हमारा प्रश्न है कि जब सुखदेव गोस्वामी ने परीक्षित महाराज के इस प्रश्न का जवाब देना शुरू करा तो उन्होंने किसी के कॉन्वर्सेशन he had referred someone's conversation while answering this sarga and visarga. Whose conversation was referred in the second canto Srimad Bhagavatam? Anyone remembers? Brahma and Narada Muni. Sorry, Brahma and Narada Muni, right? Yeah, Narada and Brahma's conversation was quoted. And there you have Purushokta prayers and all that in the sixth chapter. When all that happened, when all that discussion happened, at that point of time, Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes at the beginning of the seventh chapter, seventh chapter, where Parishit Maharaj was so excited that he wanted to hear everything about the exploits of Narad Muni. Please tell me more about Krishna Katha. Hearing about Krishna is the ultimate thing. Again, he glorifies Krishna Katha. And therein he asks several questions. Almost 7-8 questions asked by Parishit Maharaj through Sukdev Goswami. And answers to these questions is the rest of your Srimad Bhagavatam. The questions which are asked in the seventh chapter. Seventh chapter is nothing but the question asked by Parishit Maharaj to Sukdev Goswami. And then Sukdev Goswami glorifies Parishit Maharaj for the inquiry, and then he offers his respects. And then from 8th chapter, he begins to answer the question, first quoting the conversation that happened between Brahma and Lord Vishnu. And then he continues the discussion by quoting the conversation between Vidur and Maitreya. That's how your third canto begins, answering the question which had been raised in the 7th chapter of second canto. However, there is a little bit of twist or turn of events from the second canto to the third canto. Second canto, when Sukdev Goswami, while describing the conversation where similar questions as Parishit had asked, were asked by Narad, asked by Brahmaji to Lord Vishnu, or that discussion happened. At that point of time, he was about to continue with discussion on Sarga and Visarga. Then Shaunakadi Rishi now interjects. Literally, now they interjects in the whole of second canto. And they said to Sutta Goswami, before you continue your discussion of what happened about the Kalpa, Padma Kalpa discussion was about to happen, we remember that in the first canto, 13th chapter, verse number 1, you said that Vidura returned to Hastinapur. Can you please tell us why did Vidura left Hastinapur? What did he do when he left Hastinapur? Where did he all travel? What all activities he performed? And we heard that when Vidura left, he met Maitri Muni at Haridwar, at the bank of Ganges. We would also like to hear that samvad. That is how your second canto ends, the last few verses. And therefore, your third canto begins with the conversation between Vidur, not Maitreya. The third canto, chapter 1, begins with Vidur. The storyline why Vidurji left Hastinapur, because the Shaunakadi Rishi had asked. So Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur in this context writes, it appears Parikshit Maharaj also had asked a similar question to Sukhdev Goswami. And then Sukhdev Goswami thought, well, the remaining questions which I have not yet answered, all those questions are also asked by Vidur to Maitreya. So let me narrate the Vidur and Maitreya Samvad and let me answer Parikshit Maharaj's questions. That's how you get Vidur Maitreya Samvad, and that's how through the conversation of Vidur and Maitreya that we're going to read now, which is our part of discussion, is largely questions being raised in the 7th chapter of the second canto are being addressed, which have not yet been addressed like that. So that's how your third canto, chapter number 1 begins, where the whole story of how Vidura was insulted by Duryodhan, Vidura left Hastinapur, and then Vidura left, then it is said at the outskirts of Vrindavan, he happened to meet he happened to meet with Uddhava. Then the second and third chapter is all about Uddhava remembering Krishna and all that. And finally, when Vidura asked Uddhava for, that I would like to take guidance from you, please instruct me on the subject matter. Then Uddhava said, well, I have been instructed by Lord Shri Krishna to go to Badrinath or Badri Ashram to meet with the sages and share with them all that Krishna have shared with me, which you will hear in the 11th canto, Uddhav Gita. All that knowledge I've been asked by Lord Shri Krishna to go and give it to the sages at Badrika Ashram. So, second thing, because I'm younger to you, and secondly, I have somebody senior to me, that is Maitri Muni, who is just sitting some distance away at Haridwar, at the bank of Ganges. I would request you, please go and meet Maitri Muni. So, like that, Uddhavji left. It is not clear when Vidurji left, because Uddhavji also left for Badrik Ashram, and the door to Badrinath is also from Haridwar. So apparently they could have traveled together, but they did not. So not very sure. It seems Uddhavji traveled before, and Vidurji would have traveled little later on. They did not travel together, and Uddhavji's story is not mentioned anymore here now. And then Vidurji leaves, and now he comes to the bank of Ganges where he meets with Maitreya Muni. That's a little bit of background with which this chapter 5 now begins with. That's the whole story. So I hope a little bit of what's going on here, why there are multiple conversations and all that. Hopefully it makes it a little clear. Fine. So with this, we'll begin our discussion of chapter 5, where Vidurji meets with Maitreya. I will see maybe today, if not tomorrow, I'll try to draw parallels between the second canto discussion and the third canto. So you get to see that how it is the same kind of question which were raised there and being answered. And even the questions which have been already answered. Just like Prabhupada in one of the purpose, right? Okay, let me ask this question to all of you. If in case you have read before third canto or heard about third canto before, second canto you all have discussed. Why there is this discussion about creation? It seems to be again and again. How many of you agree? It seems to be there multiple times the question on creation have been asked and multiple times the creation have been described. Yes or no? Why? Why this repetition is there? Any online devotee? Any quick thoughts? We all agree, second canto, we read about Virat Purush. The first of all, we read about Virat Purush is in the first chapter only, where Ashtang Yogi, the neophyte Ashtang Yogis, for their meditation, there's a whole discussion, several verses, more than 20 verses, describing this whole 14 planetary system, representing the different parts or the limbs of the body of Virat Purush. Then again, we're going to read about Virat Purush or the creation here. So Srila Prabhupada writes in one of the purports, why this the creation have been discussed. It actually refers to either different kalpa or different times in the history when the creation has been discussed, the creation has been asked for. What happened in that particular situation? It is not this within the single day of Brahma to which we belong to. For that creation question have been asked again and again. Purpose will make that clear in the conversation on the purpose ahead. So let's begin. I'm gonna share the screen. This is actually the notes of Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's commentary along with Srila Prabhupada's commentary here. I unfortunately forgot to carry my book with me to Hinjawadi, so I had to read from Vedabase. So I have highlighted things here and we'll look it from here. All right. So this is not your regular Vedabase. This is Acharya folio, where we have commentary of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur along with Srila Prabhupada. So third canto, fifth chapter, verse number 1. Shri Shukavacha Dwari Dyunatya Rishabha Kurunam Maitriyamasinam Aghadabodham Shatopashratyachut Bhavasiddha Papracha Shaushilya Guna Vitraptaha. We have the mic to hear. Read translations. Go ahead.
Sukdev Goswami said, Vidura, the best amongst the Kuru dynasty, who was perfect in devotional service to the Lord, thus reached the source of the celestial Ganges river Haridwar, where Maitreya, the great formless learned sage of the world, fathomless learned sage of the world, was seated. Vidura, who was perfect in gentleness and satisfied in transcendence, inquired from him.
Hare Krishna. So this is a perfect setup for Srimad Bhagavatam being given here. First of all, the quality is mentioned about Maitriyam Ashinam Agad Bodham. The quality of a speaker is mentioned, Agad Bodham, of unfathomed knowledge. You see what Prabhupada writes that, unfathomed knowledge. So very interesting verse how Sukdev Goswami speaks about that this is the perfect setting for question answer on subject matter like Srimad Bhagavatam. So Maitriya, the quality of a speaker which is described, Maitriyam Asinam Agad Bodham, the one with unlimited knowledge. This is Maitriya. Then Shato Pashrati Achut Bhava Siddha. And then what happened? Now Shat Vidura, the qualities of Viduras have been described. What is this quality of a student or a Vidura here? Saushilya Gunavitraptaha, gentle, and one who was satisfied in transcendental qualities, or one who had eagerness to hear about Krishna. And where is this whole conversation is happening? Dwari Du Nadiya Rishabha Kurunam. Kahan pe ho raha hai ye? Haridwar. Haridwar, which is said to be the Prabhupada talks about it, the source of the celestial Ganges river, or Haridwar, as I say, the door to Hari, the dwars to Hari is actually Haridwar. So you have a perfect place, Haridwar. You have a most intelligent, learned devotee as Maitri Muni, and then you have a most gentle student as Vidur, who is very much attracted to the transcendental qualities. And as such a perfect setup, we have a very important discussion which is coming up. Srila Prabhupada, no, this is Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes. Can we read out the highlighted portions?
Having described the nature of the shelter of creation, the Angi, the Supreme Lord, in 4 chapters, the creation of Sarga, which is composed of his Angas, is now described in detail. Maitreya was sitting on the bank of Ganga, Dyunadya, at Haridwar, Dwari. He was not engaged in material activities.
So meaning here is now, because you have a perfect speaker, perfect student, perfect place or position, which means now Hari Katha can go on for a very, very long time. Otherwise, it is not possible. That's the point which is being highlighted here, like that. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, very beautiful. The purports of this chapter are very, very beautiful. We can read out the highlighted portions here. Vidura.
Vidura was already perfect due to his unalloyed devotion to the infallible Lord. Vidura had already surpassed the fallible nature of the living entity in conditional life due to his being
Achyuta Bhava.
Achyuta Bhava are legitimately absorbed in the devotional service of the Lord. This stage of life is called Achyuta Bhav Siddha.
Achyuta Bhava Siddha means one who is always absorbed in serving the Lord. Perfection by dint of devotional service. Like that. Last one.
The learned sage Maitreya was sitting in a solitary place on the bank of the Ganges at Haridwar. And Vidura, who was a perfect devotee of the Lord and possessed all good transcendental qualities, approached him for inquiry.
I guess those of you sitting in the corner, you have to come here because I'm going to have this Vaibhav shown all through the presentation today. All right. Now, the Saturn described what has happened or what is happening at Haridwar. From verse number 2 onwards up to verse number 9, there are 7 questions which are asked by Vidurji to Maitri Muni, which are being discussed, and which would be, which will form the conversation ahead between Maitri and Vidura, where Maitri Muni would answer that. So, text number 2, where the very first thing that Vidurji asks is to how to find real happiness. Now, this itself is very surprising. Vidurji, who's been described in this previous verse as Achyuta Bhava Siddha, one is already situated in transcendental, Achyuta Bhava, who's always absorbed in remembering Krishna or situated in transcendence, he would bother to ask about a question, how to find real happiness. Does that question make sense actually? So once again, this question has not been asked for Vidur for his sake. This question has been asked in general for the sake of everyone else who might discuss this conversation. Let's see what is described here. Vidurvacha Sukhaya karmani karoti loko Nate sukham vanyaduparamam va Vindeta bhuyas tatayeva dukkham Yadatra yuktam bhagavan vadena Sukhaya karmani, for the sake of happiness, karoti loko, everyone makes an endeavor to find happiness in this world. Natai sukham va anyat uparamam va. Unfortunately, natai sukham, they never find any happiness in this world. Va anyat uparamam va, no happiness, no satiation. Even in the work that they do, they don't find any satisfaction in that. Vindeta bhuyas, what do they achieve? On the contrary, bhuyas tata eva dukkham. Although they do every single endeavor of a conditioned living entity in this world is to seek out happiness. They don't find happiness, they don't find any satisfaction. What they get? Vindeta bhuyas tata eva dukkham. They only find or they only get misery. Yadatra yuktam bhagavan vadena. Therefore, please show us the right direction. Bhagavan vadena. So here Maitri Muni have been addressed as Bhagavan vadena. Kindly speak, kindly enlighten us, show us the right direction so that we can find real happiness. Because trying to work for our own selfish gains, fruitive activities, nobody gets any happiness or satisfaction. They only get misery or distress. That's the question being asked. Please read out the translation. Mike.
O great sage, everyone in this world engages in fruitive activities to attain happiness. But one finds neither satiation nor the mitigation of distress. On the contrary, one is only aggravated by such activities. Please, therefore, give us directions on how one should live for real happiness.
So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes, please read the highlighted portion from his purport.
Having received secret knowledge from Uddhava, who had been taught by the Lord, Vidura considered himself unqualified. Being despondent, he considered in his mind Uddhava has said.
So now here a little bit analysis is going on. Why would Vidurji ask such a question? Vidurji should have idly asked about Krishna directly. Why would he ask a question which is not of any relevance to him? Where Sukdev Goswami have already explained Achutta Bhava Siddha, he is already situated in transcendence. Why? Where's the question of he being having any kinds of material misery? So that is what being discussed here by Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. Prabhupada also mentioned in the purport. The Lord taught, please read the highlighted portion. This is Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's commentary.
The Lord taught the secret knowledge to Uddhava, the greatest and most intimate among Krishna's devotees, not to Maitreya who is listening. But that cannot be.
So this is how Vidurji is thinking, but that cannot be, because Maitri Muni was also present. So Vidurji is thinking like that. That's how Chakravarti Thakur writes. Go ahead.
To understand if Maitreya heard that knowledge or not, in the beginning, I will not ask that great soul in case it does not know.
So he thought, ideally, Maitri Muni would have heard what Lord taught Uddhava. But I am not sure. If I ask him what was taught, the higher subjects, and in case if Krishna did not taught this to Maitri Muni, there will be an embarrassing situation. So therefore, let me begin with a very simple question. That's how Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is explaining the mindset of Vidurji here. Please go ahead.
To understand if Maitreya heard that knowledge or not in the beginning, I will not ask that great soul in case he does not know. I will ask only some of my own questions. If he knows that knowledge, then he will say, O Vidura, I was taught by the Lord just for giving this knowledge to you. Please understand this knowledge about the Lord who has no birth but takes birth, in which the contradictions are resolved, which the Lord explained to me. On his own, he will explain this.
And this way, well, if Maitri Muni knows everything, they'll say, oh, Lord taught me all this thing because I can speak to you. Let me tell you something more. So let Maitri Muni explain on his own, rather than I should not, poke much and create an embarrassing situation. Srila Prabhupada writes a little something different. And it's in the middle of the purport of Prabhupada writes, why did Vidura ask this kind of a question here? So please read out what I just highlighted for all of you here. This is Srila Prabhupada's purport.
But out of natural humility, he did not immediately ask about the Lord, but inquired into a subject which would be of great importance to the common man. A common man cannot understand the Lord. He must first know the real position of his life under the influence of the illusory energy.
Therefore, our all sessions, the introductory sessions for audiences search for happiness, or something which is relevant for the time management, habits management. We never talk about Krishna as a supreme personality of God or something. Even in the famous Discover Yourself course, we घुमा फिरा के इधर उधर कर करा के finally end में लेके जाते हैं Krishna as a supreme personality of Godhead. And you know that what happens with the attendance then. When the first session is there, search for happiness or something like that, you have a huge audience or you have a hall full of audience. By the time you keep on kind of bringing the attention to the focus subject matter, and you will see, the attendance keeps on reducing. Only a handful of people remain till the time the discussion come. Who is that supreme personality God? And all of us have that experience, isn't it? So therefore, this one particular thing you will see is repeated again in this chapter when the discussion will come. Why did Srila Vyasadeva write Mahabharata? Again, the same thing. Why did Srila Vyasadeva wrote Mahabharata? Is only for the same purpose, to attract those low-minded people who have no attraction or ability to understand Vedantas or Vedic scriptures, to attract them through the subject matter of politics, sociology, etc., conflicts, familial conflicts and all that, and to attract them to Krishna gradually. Such kind of subject matters are spoken, or Srila Vyasadeva compiled Mahabharata. And similarly, something like that here, Srila Prabhupada says, Vidurji is asking Maitreya, because everyone wants to know how to find real happiness so that people can pay attention to what's going to happen next. Go ahead.
A common man cannot understand the Lord. He must first know the real position of his life under the influence of the illusory energy. In illusion, one thinks that he can be happy only by fruitive activities. But what actually happens is that one becomes more and more entangled in the network of action and reaction and does not find any solution to the problem of life. There is a nice song in this connection. Because of a great desire to have all happiness in life, I built this house. But unfortunately, the whole scheme has turned to ashes because the house was unexpectedly set on fire.
You can read the last few lines. Everyone tries.
Everyone tries to become happy by planning in the material world, but the law of nature is so cruel that it sets fire to one's schemes. The fruity worker is not happy in these schemes, nor is there any cessation of his continuous hankering for happiness.
Srila Prabhupada makes a similar comment in the first canto, 19th chapter, verse number 7. The Parikshit Maharaj, who has been cursed when the discussion is going on, And Prabhupada, something like this similar line he writes. He says, the laws of material nature is so cruel. Even a pure devotee is not spared from committing a mistake. Something to pay attention. And we are talking about Vidura. The laws of material nature is so cruel. Even Yamaraji was not spared from committing a mistake, isn't it? Yamaraji had to become a Vidura because he committed a mistake over Manduk Muni. And that's how Prabhupada, this is something a very, very important point, a subject matter of discussion and contemplation on its own. Whoever we are, when the English saying goes, to err is human, this is a Shastric Praman, or in other words, we have this reference from Prabhupada. This actually makes sense. Who has not committed a mistake? Dashrath Maharaj committed a mistake, who was none other than the father of Lord Ram. You know? So who has not committed a mistake? Every great personality. If you look at the lives of the Pandavas, there's so many mistakes they have committed. Yudhishthira Maharaj, Draupadi was so angry. How can this Yudhishthira Maharaj put me on bet when he already lost himself? Bhim committed a mistake, therefore that's why he was caught by Nahusa the Ajgar. Nahusa was their great forefather who had been cursed by Angera Muni, I believe, Agastya Muni, and then he became the serpent, the snake, Python, the Python. And then Python had captured Bhim when they were up in the mountains like that. And Bhima challenged the Python. Python said, you cannot fight with me. You don't know my power. And Bhim said, you don't know who am I? You don't challenge with me. And then Bhim was captured. And when Bhimsen did not came back to the hermitage of Yudhishthira Maharaj, and all others were saying that Yudhishthira Maharaj went out in the forest in search of Bhimsen. And Bhimsen was almost on the brink of losing his life when Yudhishthira Maharaj came. And this great conversation between Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Python happened. Where Python said, I was given a blessing. Curse was that I would become like this, and I was given a blessing that if somebody is able to answer my question satisfactorily, then I would be free from the curse. So I can only let your brother be freed only if you answer my question. There's a very brutal conversation Mahabharata describes between Yudhishthira Maharaj and the great Nahusa, who was none other than the great forefathers of Pandavas himself. Who didn't do? Mother Kunti. Everything began from the mistake Mother Kunti did, isn't it? When our Pandavas Arjun brought Draupadi, when he won the hand of Draupadi, he brought Draupadi, or Yudhishthira, everyone brought Draupadi to Mother Kunti. Yudhishthira said, hey Mata, आज का हम दान लेकर आ गए हैं. आज की भिक्षा हम लेकर आ गए हैं. Like that he said. And Mother Kunti, without turning back, she said, okay, divide equally among themselves. As if some Mahaprasadam packet has come. usko baat ke kaha jo. And when Mother Kunti turned around, she was shocked. Everyone was shocked. And the most shocked was poor Arjun and Draupadi. Shadi hamari hui hai. Baat kar kha jao. Ye kya chal raha hai? So look at it. Who did not do a mistake? Everyone did a mistake. So this is a very, very important subject. Nonetheless, it's not part of our discussion right now. But the law of nature is so cruel that here Prabhupada mentioned that it sets fire to one scheme, and the fruity work is not happy in the scheme. This point will come again when actually Vidur's life is being discussed partly again in this chapter by Maitreya Muni. He will say that I know in your previous life you were Yamaraj, and how Yamaraj had to become Vidur. So this is the time when this kind of a discussion happens about how everyone is susceptible to making a mistake, and it does happen. So how do we react to that mistake is something that we need to discuss and learn. Generally, when others do mistake, we are so eager to raise our fingers. But when mistakes happen by us, we often are looking forward for an excuse. I should be excused. You should look at my intentions, not actions. That's a harsh reality of this world. All right, so like this text talks about it, where discussion is why did Maitreya Muni, Vidurji is asking this question. That's what Prabhupada and Vishnacharya Thakur focus. And the question asked by Vidurji, the very first question is about the real happiness, how to find real happiness. And in text number 3, Vidurji describes the job role of sadhus, all of us brahmacharis. This is your job role. You can mark the shloka. What should brahmachari should be doing is mentioned in the third verse of the 5th chapter. Janasya Krishna vimukasya daiva adharmashilasya sudhukitasya anugrahaye charanti nunam bhutani bhavyani janadanasya. Very beautiful verse. Very beautiful. Janasya Krishna, Vimukasya Daivad. Janasya refers to the common man. Krishnad vimukhasya, vimukha means averse. The common man has become averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Under whose influence? Daivad, under the influence of the external energy of Maya Shakti of the Lord. Adharmashilasya sudhukitasya. Adharmashilasya. Shilasya means Vaibhav. Adharmashilasya, in other words, whose second nature has become performing irreligious activity. Adharmashilasya sudhukitasya. Su. This is Su word is there in Bhagavad Gita, 1007 references. Su means aggravated degree. Su dukhitasya. Dukhitasya means they suffer. No, that's not what Vidur is saying. Su dukhitasya. Because they have become averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the influence of the Maya Shakti, they're only suffering. So what should a sadhu do? The next two lines. Anugrahaye charanti nunam. Therefore, the sadhus charanti means chalte hain. They travel. They wander around. Anugrahaye, to give their compassion. Out of their compassion, they move around. Bhutani bhavayani janadanasya. Bhutani persons. Bhavyani means a philanthropic or highly compassionate souls like yourself. Janadanasya is the Supreme Personality God. In other words, they carry the message of the Lord in their heart and they move around to show compassion to such kind of people who have become averse to Krishna Katha, Krishna consciousness, and what happens because of which they only suffer. So this is the job role of brahmacharis. This is what we are here for, isn't it? Let's take a look what Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes. Please read out the highlighted portion.
Only great devotees like you, merciful to all souls, know the truth. That is explained in this verse. Bhavyani Bhutani means auspicious devotees.
So, to be obedient, Prabhupada purport.
To be obedient to the wishes of the Supreme Lord is the natural position of every living entity. But due only to past misdeed, a living being becomes averse to the sense of subordination to the Lord and suffers all the miseries of material existence. No one has anything to do but render devotional service to the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. Therefore, any activity other than transcendental loving service to the Lord is more or less a rebellious action against the Supreme Will.
So, any activity, if it is not called as bhakti or done as a bhakti, then it's nothing but it shows the rebellious nature of a living entity. And Prabhupada says, all fruitive activities, all empirical philosophy, or even mysticism are more or less is against the sense of subordination to the Lord. And whoever is engaged in any such activity is more or less condemned by the laws of material nature. However, the second point, the second part of the purport, the great unalloyed devotees, please read from the highlighted portion up to the end of the purport. The great unalloyed devotees, what do they do?
Great unalloyed devotees of the Lord are compassionate towards the fallen, and therefore they travel all over the world with the mission of bringing souls back to Godhead, back to home.
Who is writing this? Srila Prabhupada. Looks like Srila Prabhupada is talking about himself only, isn't it? He traveled 14 times around the world. And he was doing the same thing actually, wandering around, moving around. That was such an advanced stage when his health wasn't good. And in the recent years, we have heard from Prabhupada disciples, even the lectures that we had at Pune. What is his name of devotee? One is Shruti Kruti Prabhu and the other devotee who had been a person. Hari Sari Prabhu. Remember, we had a lecture by Hari Sari Prabhu? It was an online lecture on the morning, some 3-day katha. And there he shared the details which actually even I was not aware of. That how Prabhupada's health was so poor, so bad, so poor, yet he continued with his preaching engagements. Vrindavan, when Prabhupada was recovering, then why did suddenly Prabhupada decide to go to London? Because there was an invitation for some very special program which had been arranged. Doctor advised him, everyone told him, Prabhupada, don't go. And Prabhupada didn't only had a plan to go to London, Prabhupada had made a plan from London to go to New Vrindavan. Because there was something else to happen there. And devotees were saying, please, Prabhupada, don't go. But Prabhupada said, no. I have to go. I have to inspire. My devotees are, seeing my devotees gives me strength. And that's what happened when Prabhupada went to London. His health deteriorated very, very much. And what happened? Nothing happened. Prabhupada had to return back. And it's just a month, 1.5 months before Prabhupada departed from this world. And until that point of time, Ambrish Prabhu was actually the personal servant. In London, when Prabhupada went, Ambrish Prabhu was the one who was serving. But Ambrish Prabhu did not came back with Prabhupada then. Because he understood now Prabhupada is going to depart from this world, the way the health has become. And he said, I just could not tolerate seeing Prabhupada leave. So I could not continue. So some other devotee took charge of serving Prabhupada at that point of time, like that. So great unalloyed devotees of the Lord are compassionate. So here Vidurji is speaking for Maitreya Muni, like that. Please continue.
Such pure devotees of the Lord carry the message of Godhead in order to deliver the fallen souls. And therefore, the common man who is bewildered by the influence of external energy of the Lord should avail himself of their association.
Yeah, should avail himself of their association. Prabhupada writes as a verdict. But it doesn't happen generally. People run away. Forget about running away, seeing a sadhu. Even if you announce there is a Bhagavad Gita class, particularly just like the crowd that I deal with, people get so scared. Bhagavad Gita? Just like we have an academy there where they teach kids. This is just a side project to help in preaching. So now it had been functioning well for the last 2 years. I got a good reputation. So I said, now is the time to inject spirituality. Now, those who are part of this academy, I said, now you have to start Bhagavad Gita classes for all your kids and start with something related to discover yourself kind of thing. And we can call it directly a Bhagavad Gita kind of a program. So he made an announcement. There are more than 100 plus students and very good relationship. Everything is going on very nice. And once in a while in between, we were testing the waters just to see how the parents respond. So we were doing some kind of one-time sessions. I would never do it because parents come for my program. That's a different thing. But another of a group of students, they're doing with the kids. So there'll be one-time session about life management, time management, all that. And whenever this kind of session would happen, parents 100% send their kids. Just last week only it happened. So now for the first time we announced that we're going to have a 5-day session of 1 hour each, a special session for the students, exclusively for the students, based on Bhagavad Gita. How many of you like to attend? 5 days went, no response came. And the devotee was saying, so I kind of forgot about it. So when we were going for a program, he was with me. Then I asked him, hey, what happened to the project that I gave you? Did it happen? He said, Prabhuji, 5-day program ended. No response came. Nobody was interested. They were afraid. So I said, what happened? I said, when I interacted with a few of them, they said, no, our kids are very young. This Bhagavad Gita and all that is not good for them right now. But Prabhupada is with full confidence in saying that, to overcome the influence of the external energy of the Lord, one should avail himself of their association. The very first point which is mentioned here is Adharma Shilasya Sudhukitasya. Now, all of you have read Nectar of Devotion, if I'm correct, right? Bhakti Shastri is there, of course, you're here. So what does Bhakti Shastri Srila Rupa Goswami describes? What is the major cause of suffering in this world? What is the prime cause of the suffering in this world? Ignorance is avidya is the prime cause. What happens from avidya? Avidya leads to kama, desires, material desires, sinful desires. And then sinful desire leads to action, papa. And then kutam, bijam, all that happens, correct. Because therefore, adharma shilasya, Vidurji mentions like that. Let's go to text number 4. Here, Vidurji would ask a second question where he says, please give me instruction on the devotional service to the Lord. Tasadu varya dishavartamashna samradhito bhagavan yena pumsam Hridi sthito yachati bhakti pute Jnanam satatvadhigamam puranam. The sadhu varya, or best, varya means the best of the best. The sadhu varya, adish, please instruct me. Vartama means what is best for me, or the direction. Sham, auspiciousness. Please, just like Yashre Hasha Nishitam Bruhitan me, Arjuna asked to Krishna and Bhagavad Gita. Similarly, Vidurji said, please tell us what is the best, what is the right direction for us. Samradito Bhagavan Yena Pumsam, Samradito Bhagavan, by which, tell us the means by which we can perfectly serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hridi Sitho Yachati Bhakti Pute. Residing in the hearts, Yachati, he awards us unalloyed Bhakti Pute, Jnanam Satatva Adhigamam Puranam. This is something like Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam. In other words, when you render devotional service to the Lord residing in the heart of a living entity awards him Buddhi Yoga, or the transcendental knowledge by which one can come to him. Please read the translation.
Therefore, O great sage, please give me instruction on the transcendental devotional service of the Lord, so that he who is situated in the heart of everyone can be pleased to impart from within knowledge of the absolute truth in terms of the ancient Vedic principle, delivered only to those who are purified by the process of devotional service.
So here, Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, when he's asking for Tasadhu, so he says Tattva teaches the auspicious path, the path of worship. What he wants to know is about the complete knowledge about the absolute truth in that sense. Vadanti tat tattva vidas. He wants to know about Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. I want to know entirely like that. That's how Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur mentions. Purana means ancient, not recent, like Mimamsa, the philosophy. Puppet, please read out. Highlighted.
By devotional service only does one's heart become completely purified from all material covering like karma, jnana, and yoga. Only in such a purified stage does the Lord, who is seated in everyone's heart with the individual soul, give instructions so that the devotee can reach the ultimate destination of going back home, back to Godhead. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 10.10. Tesham satata yuktana bhajatam. Only when the Lord is satisfied with the devotional service of the devotee does he impart knowledge, as he did for Arjuna and Uddhava.
So here, the discussion which is happening in the purport is something which is one of the main subject matters of Bhagavad Gita also. Why does the Jnanis and Ashtang yogis and all that, they have to really struggle a lot. And in the second canto, you read about Krama Mukti, how a neophyte Ashtang yogi gradually gets purified, and then by dint of his own endeavor, he moves from one Shishumara to another planet and all that, ultimately go to Brahmalok. And then when the whole creation ends, then he has to, by his own endeavor, penetrates through earth, water, fire, like that. Hearing that itself is very tiring. God knows how to do it also, That's whole Ashtanga Yoga being described in the second canto. So let's just briefly make one or two questions here, and then we'll move forward. The first question is about what is the science of making progress in bhakti? How do we make advancement in bhakti yoga? Now, before we take this question, if I go back to again on Bhagavad Gita on this subject matter, what would be the difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga, if there is any? Karma yoga and bhakti yoga, what is the difference? Because once we understand the difference, then we know what is the science of making a progress. Any thoughts? And then we'll come to the discussion of why this is again and again is mentioned. Jnani, Ashtanga yogis, so much they struggle. But for devotees, it's very easy. So much easy. Neha bikrama nashosti pratyavayo na vidyate. So alpa. What did Ajamil do? Ajamil had got totally distracted. Yet Lord Shri Krishna had inspired Vishnu Dutas to go and save Ajamil. And that's how Ajamil was saved. And then Ajamil, being instructed by Vishnu Dutas, went to Haridwar and perfected his life. But this doesn't happen to Gyanis and Yogis. And one of the purports, Prabhupada writes, no, it is not the purport actually. Giriraj Maharaj, when he was a young boy, when he met Srila Prabhupada for the first time in Boston, it is mentioned in that conversation, he challenged Srila Prabhupada in the sense of, because he was of the idea or conception, I am God. That was his idea. At that time he challenged and he asked Srila Prabhupada on the subject matter of who is God? Am I God or there is a God? Something like that was the question. And Prabhupada gave a very beautiful answer, which convinced Giriraj Maharaj entirely that I cannot be God. What did Srila Prabhupada said? Srila Prabhupada said, God is always God. If you had to be God, then why would you have forgotten that you're not God today? Because you are under illusion, which means illusion is greater than God, so you're not God. And second thing, why would God create a competition for himself? Why would God create a competition for himself? Even if you are a competitor, third point Prabhupada said, then why would God help you make advancement to unnecessarily create a trouble for himself? Therefore, God does not help all these yogis and Ashtanga yogis or Jnana yogis to make progress. They have to strive on their own endeavor. Whereas for Bhakti yogi, just Ajamil is an example like that, and Krishna helps. So, what's the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga for that reason? We had somebody raised a hand here. Vasudev Krishna Prabhu, go ahead.
Is it audible?
Not audible.
Is it audible now?
Yes, Vasudev Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. In Karma Yoga, we had heard that what we like, we try to engage dovetail in the service of the Lord, and we offer it to the Lord. And Bhakti Yoga, pleasure of Lord is kept as the first preference. And
Correct. So the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is Yome Bhaktya Prachati. It is done to please me. Whereas Karma Yoga, the action is done with an understanding, let this work purify me. That is Karma Yoga. Everything is done with an understanding, let me get purified. And of course, gradually through this path, under the guidance of bona fide guru, then person comes to the stage of Bhakti Yoga, where now he has made an advancement enough, purification enough, now where he wants to do everything for the pleasure of Krishna. So when this pleasure of Krishna comes, which means seva for Krishna, therefore it is mentioned here, which we'll see in the second paragraph of the purport, where therefore Krishna helps the devotees, but not the jnanis, yogis, and karmis. And therefore they fail to understand the conception of the Lord. Why? How do we understand the Lord? Dadami buddhi yogam tam yenam upyanti the. We understand God only when Krishna reveals. To the degree Krishna reveals to us, to the degree we understand. And to whom does Krishna reveals? Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. Tesham satata yuktanam, prior to that, ye yathamam prapadyante. To the degree we have translated our bhoga vritti to seva vritti. To that degree, we have started rendering services priti purvakam. To that degree, Krishna awards us buddhi yoga. That's what Prabhupada said in the previous paragraph also. And he reveals that, enlightens us within our own heart, and then gives us the direction to make further progress. For jnanis, yogis, and karmis, he just cannot help. Please read out the purport. Vasudev Krishna Prabhu, you read out. Those are online now. So they
okay,
are also.
Jnanis, yogis, and karmis cannot expect this direct cooperation of the Lord. They are not able to satisfy the Lord by transcendental loving service, nor do they believe in such service to the Lord. The bhakti process, as performed under the regulative principles of Vaidhi Bhakti or devotional service following the prescribed rules and regulations, is defined by the revealed scriptures and confirmed by great acharyas. This practice can help the neophyte devotee to rise to the stage of Raga Bhakti, in which the Lord responds from within as the Chaitya Guru or the spiritual master as superconsciousness. All transcendentalists, other than
That's the point. I had the point purport continues about all other transcendentalists, other than devotees. They don't make any difference between Brahman and Parabrahman. And therefore, Krishna does not help them. And to understand Brahman, Parabrahman are two distinct is very important. Where devotees understand that, therefore, Parabrahman helps them. That's the whole point which is mentioned in the purport. And the last 3 lines, please read out.
on behalf of many neophyte devotees, Vidura, at the very first instance, inquired from Maitreya about the path of devotional service, by which the Lord, who is seated within the heart, can be pleased.
Now, this is very interesting. Vidurji, who had witnessed all the Vrindavan pastimes, Kurukshetra Hastinapur is not too far off. Pretty sure Vidurji was aware of all those things. Vidurji is the same person whose house Lord Shri Krishna came and stayed. Vidurji is the same person who Lord Shri Krishna remembered while departing from this world. He did not remember Maitra Muni. Now Vidurji has been already established as a pure devotee of the Lord. I mean, किसी के घर पे जाके भगवान खा रहे हो, वो भी केले नहीं, छिलके खा रहे हो. You know, छिलके खा रहे हो. So this is too much now. So which is already established. So Prabhupada is making a point. Vidurji asking a question, please tell us how we can render devotional service to the Lord. No, it's not for Vidurji. So for whom this question has been asked, that's what Prabhupada says. On behalf of many neophyte devotees, so Vidurji is making this inquiry. How can somebody perform bhakti? And now in fifth verse, the third question is being asked. Please narrate the pastimes of Purusha avatars, which means creation, maintenance, destruction would happen like this. How Mahavishnu does the creation, Garbhodaksha Vishnu, Shirodaksha Vishnu. About that, a question has been asked. करोति कर्माणि कृतावतारो यानि आत्मतंत्रो भगवान् त्रयाधीशः यथा ससर्जाग्र इदं निरीह संस्थापया वृत्तिं जगतो विधत्ते. Let's read the translation of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur for this shloka.
Please describe how Krishna, the Lord of these three Purusas, without desire performs pastimes in this world, and how, as Mahavishnu, Lord of the three Gunas, after destroying the universe, again creates and maintains it.
So how does this creation, maintenance, destruction happens? Please explain. Karoti karmani krita avataro. He has accepted different incarnations for what? Yani atmatantro bhagavan triadishaha. Atmatantra, he is fully independent. He is Bhagavan. Triadishaha is the Lord of the three worlds. Yatha sasarja, he created Agre at first, this cosmic manifestation. Samsthapya, by establishing means of livelihood for the whole. Means how he maintains. Like that, a question has been raised. Please read out the commentary by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur.
Describe how he performs actions like lifting Govardhana. Describe how the control of the three Gunas Mahavishnu, previously Agre, at the end of the lost life of Brahma, after destroying Samstapya, the universe, again at the beginning of the Brahma's life, a Mahakalpa created universe and then maintained it with him.
Very, very important verse. If we say just like, I guess the shloka has already come, Aho Bakiyam Sanakala Kutam, right? It was probably in the 4th chapter, where Uddhava ji talks about, oh, alas, what a compassion of my Lord. Baki, the sister of Baka, Putana, the Lord delivered Putana, not Sayujya Mukti, but awarded the motherhood in Vrindavan to the one who came to kill him. What a compassion. And similar kind of compassion has been depicted in this shloka also. What has been described here, the Lord creates, provides everything for the maintenance, and destroys, again creates, again maintains, again destroys. What is the purpose of this material creation? The purpose of this material creation is, there are two major purposes that Srila Prabhupada highlights in his purpose in Srimad Bhagavatam. Let's talk about only one purpose. Why this material world is created? To give a chance to the condition, to reform the conditioned living entities of their enviousness towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they come to their senses and they begin to align themselves to the Lord and see, Lord, how much is willing to help us get reformed, that he keeps on creating, maintaining, destroying, keeps on creating, maintaining, destroying. And we don't know for how many times we have been part of this samsara. For how many times we have been kind of undergoing this whole samsara. As you know, when the whole creation ends, every jiva goes back into the body of Mahavishnu. And then through his glance, again, he invests in the Mahatattva. And then when Mahatattva gets agitated by the time, along with the modes of material nature, and again, jivas. First of all, the first jiva born is Brahma. And then Brahma gives the bodies to all these jivas, 8.4 million yonis, and the jivas gets their body. Again, the whole world is destroyed. The whole creation is destroyed. Again, Lord does it. It is mentioned Atma Tantra, his self-independent, and you would have read, his Atma Rama also. He's fully satisfied. If somebody is fully satisfied, and Bhagavad Gita it is said, Lord has got nothing to do with material world. He is fully independent, he is fully satisfied, he has got nothing to do with the material world. Yet he is creating material world again and again and again. And not only creating, he is maintaining this material world. It just shows the endless compassion of the Lord for the jivas. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada would call Krishna is our ultimate father. Because even father in this world can give us compassion to a certain degree. Imagine you flunk in your class. Let's say you're an engineering student, you flunk in one semester. Father may say, all right, no problem, which is very difficult for a father to say. Generally doesn't happen like this. Even if your father have to say like that, you flunk twice, thrice, 4 times. सबको पता है क्या होने वाला है. घर से निकाल दी जाएंगी, हाँ या ना? खूब पिटाई पड़ने वाली है. You rascal, you're wasting my money. I'm doing so much for your maintenance. I created you, and you, my creation, is destroying me. So before you destroy me, I throw you out of the house, isn't it? But look at Krishna, his endless compassion. He goes through again and again through the creation, maintenance, and destruction that has been highlighted. And therefore, you will see in the purport, Prabhupada focuses on the overpopulation thing. Where Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, very beautiful purport again. Prabhupada writes, this whole idea, Krishna maintains everyone. Nobody in species other than human beings commits suicide because of no food. Nobody commits suicide. Nobody dies out of starvation except for human species. But human species which have been provided the higher intelligence, they are saying we have no food to eat. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, it's just because of maladministration, the poor administration of the leaders. Why? Because they have become very selfish and they are trying to act as a competitor to the Lord. And therefore, there is a whole scarcity in the world for the resources. And of course, again, if you look back at the idea of Bhagavad Gita, why there is scarcity in this world? Because yajna is not being performed. Krishna created, we'll read this in third canto here only in this series of discussion. Krishna created this culture of yajna, the symbiotic relationship between the devatas and human beings. In the third chapter, Krishna mentioned in Bhagavad Gita that I created so that both can live happily. And in this third canto, you will read why Krishna created, because devatas requested the Lord. Please create the system of yajna, a symbiotic relationship by which the jivas will perform yajnas which will nourish us, and in return we will provide for them. This was the desire of the devatas. We'll read here only in the series of discussion that we're going to have it like that Lord created. So please read the purport now. We are on the 5th verse, right? So we read this here. Okay, so whole material creation is conducted by 3 purushas. Fine. Thinking material nature to be independent, like seeking milk from the nipple like bags on the neck of a goat. This is Prabhupada's class. Okay, Lord is independent, desireless. Now, this is the point which I was mentioning. Please start reading from here. Anyone who is online would like to read? So at least time and again, I get to see that our devotees online are also active. If anyone wants to read, they can raise their hands. They can read out the highlighted portion. So, Tri Vikrama Bandhu Prabhu. Boliye Prabhu. Padhiye.
He does not create the material world for his own satisfaction as we create our household affairs to fulfill our material desires. Actually, the material world is created for the illusory enjoyment of the conditioned souls who have been against the transcendental service of the Lord since time immemorial. But the material universe are full in themselves. There is no scarcity for maintenance in the material world. Because of their poor fund of knowledge, the materialists are disturbed when there is an apparent increase of population on the earth.
Hare Krishna. The world is full for our existence. Look at the compassion of the Lord, where he provides every necessity. And to also help us revive our relationship with him, then he creates Vedic scriptures. And even when he cannot understand Vedic scriptures, then he personally descends and perform leelas in different avatars, different incarnations, so that something will get attracted to. And when his pastimes are concluded, then he sends his representatives to help us. फिर भी ढीठ होने की हद होती है. I mean, I'm not speaking about us. In general, the living entities, despite so many attempts by the Lord, Yet the jiva is not willing to get reformed. But look at the causeless mercy of the Lord, that he continues creating this creation again and again and again, giving another opportunity. Maybe this time he will reform. And because Krishna is out of his causeless mercy, giving us an opportunity to get reformed, and because he's showing by his action, it makes appropriate sense for him to demand a costless devotion from us. Ahituki bhakti, isn't it? Sarvadharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. So sometimes when we speak on this verse, we say, Are, Krishna is a little strict. Mamekam, only my shelter. Now, why he should not demand? Because he's also providing for us like this now. By his causeless mercy, when he's giving, therefore bhakti is said to be causeless, ahituki. Why? Because Krishna is himself setting an example how he is providing for us. So why he should not demand? He's not only demanding, he's also proving by his action. That's the point here. Please, Prabhu, continue reading. The other species.
The other species of living entities who far outnumber human society are never disturbed for maintenance. They are never seen dying of starvation. It is only human society that is disturbed about the food situation, and to cover up the real fact of administrative mismanagement takes shelter in the plea that the population is excessively increasing. If there is any scarcity in the world, it is the scarcity of God consciousness. Otherwise, by the grace of the Lord, there is no scarcity of anything.
If there is any scarcity in this world, there's a scarcity of God consciousness. Our Acharya has mentioned about the number of gopis in the Ras Leela. If you read the 10th canto, when you will read the commentaries there, does anyone know how many gopis were there, Krishna? The duration of night was a day of Brahma, right? How many gopis were dancing with Krishna during that Rasa Leela? 125 crore is the population of India right now. That's the population of India right now. You're quoting a little wrong number. The population or the number of gopis who were dancing with Krishna, it is described 100 crores. And every one of them felt that Krishna is with me, like that. So there is, the point I'm trying to make here is there is nothing impossible for Krishna. Everything the Lord provides. Only thing, as Prabhupada says, is a scarcity of God consciousness. Otherwise, there's no scarcity for anything. Now, in text number 6, fourth question is asked: how does Lord manifest himself as nature? Yatha punah swakhe, yatha punah swekha idam niveshya. Shete guhayam sanivritta vritti. Yogeshwaradhishwara eka eta. Anupravishto bahuda yatha asit. What time we break for break? 12. We'll read the translation and then we break for a break. Okay? Please read the
He
translation.
lies down on his own heart, spread in the form of the sky, and thus placing the whole creation in that space. He expands himself into many living entities which are manifested as different species of life. He does not have to endeavor for his maintenance because he is the master of all mystic powers and the proprietor of everything. Thus, he is distinct from the living entities.
So this is the purport which I was referring before, where Prabhupada writes why there's a discussion again and again about creation. Prabhupada will write in the purport, which will see after a break. How long is the break? 15 minutes? So it's 12:05. We all can resume back at 12:20. And the class goes until what time? And then class goes to 1:45. So we have around 1 hour, 25 minutes and something like that, right? Fine. Thank you. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So, अभी तक जो हमने चर्चा करी है, oh, I'm sorry, this is English. What we have discussed so far is where Sukdev Goswami began to speak about the meeting between Maitri Muni and Vidura. Rather, I should say Vidurji meeting with Maitreya. The very first was talked about the perfect speaker, uh, who's been described as Agada Bodham with unfathomable knowledge, and the listener has been described as Achyuta Bhava Siddha, whose heart is filled with emotions for Krishna. The speaker, perfect student comes together at a perfect place. Dwari du Nadiya Rishabha Kurunam at Haridwar. What happened? There Vidura began to ask a question. The very first question he asked in the text too, how to find real happiness. The question was not intended for Vidura. Vidura did not intend to ask that question for himself. Rather, that question was intended to attract the attention of a common man, because this is a question which perturbs a common man. And then in text number 3, Viduji described or briefly discussed what is the job role of sadhus. Anugrahaye charanti nunam bhutani bhavayani janardanasa. Janardanasya anugrahaye. To show their compassion, charanti, they travel all over the world to give their compassion. Bhavyani means they are the greatest philanthropic. In other words, the greatest philanthropic work that can be performed is. The second question was asked, please give me instruction on how I can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada said, well, this question has been asked on behalf of many neophyte devotees, you know, like this, because Vidurji has been, anyways, everyone knows he's a pure devotee of the Lord. And then text number 5, please narrate the pastimes of Purusha Avatara. In other words, how does this creation, maintenance, and destruction happens? There, Prabhupada mentioned the purport, the material universe are always full in themselves. This is what we are supposed to read, right? Or we completed this? The whose purport we are supposed to read? We were 6. So in the 5th verse, he spoke about the unfathomable compassion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prior to this chapter, in 4th chapter, Aho Bhakiyam Sanakala Kutam, like that, Uddha expressed that how merciful my Supreme Lord, my dear Lord is. Look, even to the lady who wanted to kill Krishna, he awarded her, he awarded her the position of a mother. So therein the point is mentioned that how Lord does not pay attention to the results, but he pays attention to the effort. Whereas a common man pays attention to the result. The common man or the people of this world would value you based on what results you have produced. But whereas Krishna does not see the results, he looks at the effort. We are talking about Vidurji, right? This is Vidurji's Samvad. And if you look at it, there are many beautiful lessons that we can learn from Vidurji's life. That's not my discussion, but I just want to make one point, just to reflect on Vidurji's life for a sadhaka for that reason. From one perspective, as we saw that Vidurji was kicked out of Hastinapur in the beginning of the 3rd canto, from one perspective, Vidurji was an utter failure. All his life, he tried to resolve or to reconcile Kauravas and Pandavas. For that reason, at the end of the day, spending major part of his life acting as a supervisor or an advisor for Dhritarashtra, what happened? He failed in his service. He was kicked out. It's very interesting. Was Vidura a failure? No. Why? Because Krishna remembered him at the end of his concluding pastimes. So Krishna, for him, the efforts count, not the result. That's the point we're trying to make here in this regard, like that. So coming back to this point again, we were reading about this 5th verse about the compassion of the Supreme Personality Godhead. We discussed how compassionate he is, that he is willing. Can we just keep the phone on mute, please? Yeah. Where Lord is willing to do creation, maintenance, destruction again and again. No terms and conditions. For how many times I'll give you a chance? Unlimited time. Like that, Lord compassion has been kind of, we can see the Lord's compassion. in the 5th verse. And now we come to the 6th shloka, which we read. We read the translation also, if I'm correct, where he's asking, our Viduji is asking, how does the Lord manifest himself in the nature? And now let's read the purport of Srila Prabhupada, where Prabhupada will say, why is the question regarding creation mentioned, destructions are mentioned several times in the Srimad Bhagavatam? Please read out the highlighted portion.
The questions regarding creation, maintenance, and destruction, which are mentioned in many parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam, are in relation to different millenniums, Kalpa, and therefore they are differently described by different authorities when questioned by different
That's the
students.
point. Therefore, because of different kalpas, and therefore different course students have asked different teachers, and they've been described a little differently. Now, what ahead, Prabhupada writes, there is no difference. Go ahead.
There is no difference regarding the creative principles and the Lord's control over them. Yet there are some differences in the minute details because of different kalpas. The
Gigantic sky.
The gigantic sky is the material body of the Lord, called the Virat Rupa, and all material creations are resting on the sky or the heart of the Lord. Therefore, beginning from the sky, the first material manifestation to the gross vision down to the earth, everything is called Brahman. Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahman. There is nothing but the Lord, and He is one without a second.
Hare Krishna. And this question, now actually, because question has been asked earlier by Parishit Maharaj to Sukdev Goswami. So Sukdev Goswami is answering the same question by quoting a conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. The same question have been already raised in the 2nd canto, which we saw before. And I gave you a little overview here. Just to go back again to complete the little point I was making about Vidurji, that we can learn that how Vidurji's life shows that he was a repeated failure. And despite a repeated failure, when he was kicked out of Hastinapur, he did not say, my dear Lord, I did everything for you. Where is your protection? Masuchaha, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Where is your protection? You did not give me success. Now you're not giving me my house also. You're taking away everything. So these personalities from Mahabharata, these is worth contemplating on. It shows, proves very, very beautiful and vital lessons. Philosophy is one thing that we read in here in Bhagavad Gita or, in Srimad Bhagavatam. But unless we have role models who have depicted those situations, when we are put into a crisis, it becomes very difficult. Just by recalling shlokas, things don't get rectified. Ajamil was also reciting so many shlokas when he was again looking at and again reciting a shloka. Again looking back, again reciting a shloka. That didn't make a difference actually. So jnana does not help that way. But if we have some role models that we know that how they reacted, how they responded, and largely the 1st canto is all about that, teaches you how to deal with crisis. Like Bhishma Pitama or even the Parishit Maharaj, the 19th chapter. Parishit Maharaj was betrayed, was cheated, and not betrayed for a small thing. He was betrayed to death. He was cursed to death for no mistake of his own. And how did Parishit Maharaj reacted? 19th chapter talks about it. Like that, these personalities highlight some very, very important lessons. So here Vidurji is kind of asking now once again about how Lord manifests in the form of a nature. So much has happened with Vidurji, yet he has not lost his faith and he is not asking question to Maitreya Muni, why Krishna did not protect me? When Duryodhan, kind of challenged me to throw me out of the kingdom, where was Krishna's protection? There's no question like that. If you read all Vidura's question as you're going through it, not at all. He's just curious to hear more about Krishna. So let's come to the 7th verse, where now he would ask after Purusha Avatar. 5th question is about Leela Avatar. Kridan Viddhate Dujago Suranam Shemaya Karmani Avatar Bhede Sushlokamole Charitamritani. There is something, what is this? So here the English is not mentioned on the 7th line. Oh, the one line is missing here. I'll read out from the book. Krida vidatte dvijago surana Shemaya karmani avatar bhede Mano na trapyati api shanvatamna Shushlokamale charitamritani. I got confused. I thought I read every shloka had 4 lines. How come this shloka is only a 3 line? So I was like, I got confused a little bit. Okay, so beautiful verse again. Kridan. Kridan means playful things, play things like that. So either, in other words, means pastimes. Kridan vidyate dvija gosurana. Very beautiful thing. The Lord performs his pastimes for the pleasure of dvija. Go suranam. Surana means devatas. Dvija means twice born. Go means the cows. Kridan vidyate dujago suranam shemaya karamani avatar bhede, for their welfare, for the welfare of the devotees, paritanaya sadhunam, for their welfare, Lord takes different incarnations and perform different pastimes, isn't it? Generally, Lord appears because Brahmaji requests, Lord appeared to kill Hiranyakashipu just because he wanted to fulfill the words of Prahlad Maharaj, etc., etc. And then manona tripyanti shanvatam, manona tripyanti shanvatam na. Manona tripyanti api shanvatam naha. And the mind is never tripyati, satisfied. Na satisfied. Mind is never satisfied despite hearing about him. Shushloka mauli charitamritani. Shushloka means auspicious. Mauli. This is Marathi word, right? Mauli. They say that in Marathi, right? What does in Marathi language Mauli means? Mother. The mother of all mothers, Krishna is mentioned here. Okay, this is the Mauli here. Mauli of the Lord, Charitra, Amritani. Amritani, which means eternal. So here, in one of the previous verses, dissatisfaction, material dissatisfaction was discussed. How the conditioned living entities, despite working hard, Sukhaya Karamani, text number 2, the dissatisfaction was mentioned that they are never satisfied, they're never satiated. Now there is another dissatisfaction mentioned here. Similarly, devotees are never satisfied hearing enough of Krishna, but there's a gulf of difference when this dissatisfaction is mentioned. That dissatisfaction is out of frustration. This dissatisfaction means ye dil mange more. Keep coming, keep coming. That is the difference between the spiritual happiness and material happiness. That's the thing which is mentioned. Please read out the translation. Let's read Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's translation here.
Please describe how Krishna in different avatars performs pastimes, producing auspiciousness for the Brahmanas, cows, and Devatas. Hearing the sweet pastimes of the most glorified beings, our minds can never be satisfied. Avatars refers to forms such as Matsya and Kurma.
So our minds can never be satisfied. Mano nata priti api shanvatam. Mind is never satisfied. The difference is made between material and spiritual happiness. Let's read the purport that Srila Prabhupada writes.
The Lord appears in this universe in different incarnations like Matsya, Kurma, Baraha, and Narsimha, and he manifests his different transcendental activities for the welfare of the twice born, the cows and the demigods. The Lord is directly concerned with the twice born or civilized man. A civilized man is one who has taken his birth twice. A living entity takes birth in this mundane world due to union of male and female. A human being is born due to union of the father and mother, but a civilized human being has another birth by contact with a spiritual master who becomes the actual father. Because the bona fide spiritual master as the representative of the Lord is the eternal father, because the spiritual master has the responsibility to lead the disciple to spiritual salvation or the ultimate goal of life. Therefore, a civilized man must be twice born, otherwise he is no more than the lower animals.
Then go.
The
Prabhupada
cow-
writes about the cow. Her cow is the most important animal because her milk helps in improving the intelligence, develops the finer tissues in the mind or intelligence. And then Prabhupada says, a civilized man.
A civilized man is expected to live on foodstuffs comprising fruits, vegetables, grains, sugar, and milk.
And then Prabhupada writes about how the bull helps in agriculture process of producing grain and all that. The demigods, now Suranam. The Dvija has been discussed, the Go has been discussed. Now Prabhupada writes about Suranam. What about Suranam?
The demigods or the living entities who live on the higher planets are far superior to human beings. Since they have better arrangements for living conditions, they live far more luxuriously than human beings, and yet they are all devotees of the Lord.
Just to give protection to civilized men,
The cow and the demigods were directly responsible for the regulative life of progressive self-relation. The whole system of material creation is planned so that the conditioned souls may have the opportunity for self-realization. One who takes advantage of such an arrangement is called demigod or civilized man.
Suranam. So who is that? One who takes advantage of this material creation for the purpose of self-realization. And what does a cow do?
The cow is meant to help maintain such high standard of living.
The Lord's pastimes for the protection of the twice born are all transcendental. And then Papa talks about now is about why about material dissatisfaction and spiritual dissatisfaction. So if you remember the second canto in the first chapter, verse number 2, let me just pull out our 2.1.2. When our Sukhdev Goswami glorifies Varyaneshata Prashna, after that he says, the people in this world have many subject matters to discuss. Shrotavyadini Rajendra Naranam Santi Sahasrasha. Sahasrasha. The people of this world, Apashyam Atmatattvam Graheshu Grahamedinam. Those who are Grahamedinam, Grahamedi Grahastha. In Sanskrit, the word Medi has a great significance. This whole idea of Grahamedi comes from a word called as Medi Stambha. What is Medi Stambha? Medi Stambha. Stambha is pole. Medi Stambha refers to the pole to which the bull is tied. So the husband tied to a Graha is called as Grahamedi. This is the meaning of Grahamedi. Graheshu Grahamedinam, the one. And interestingly, Grahani, you know, this whole word Grahani is one who keeps a person attached to the house. We'll see this word Grahani also come in our discussion in what we're reading in that canto. So here Shruta Goswami says, Shrotavyadini Rajendra, O king, people of this world who are Grahamedinam, who are very attached to household affairs, Narnam Santi Sahasrasha, they have hundreds and thousands of subject matter to hear, but Krishna consciousness. And they are never satisfied. Interestingly, a case study for of your perusal. You know how the TVs became popular in India? Yeah, I was hearing there was a point mentioned, it was interesting. I mean, I had no idea of it, but I knew that even we purchased the TV just for the purpose of watching Ramayana. So there was this case study which was said that in those days in India, nobody was buying TV when TV were introduced because of strong social fabric that we have. You know, अभी तो apartments आ गए तो लोग बात नहीं करते हैं, but पहले when people lived in individual bungalows, we had a thick relationship with our neighbors and kids will run here and there. So nobody had, and everyone in those days, I remember through my childhood days, every day, if it is winter season, the whole family will come and sit outside in the veranda. And वहाँ पे सब, you know, भुट्टा भून रहे हैं, कुछ कर रहे हैं, and you know, पड़ोसी will also come. There used to be like a celebration. Nobody used to be inside the house. Now, most of my brahmacharya ashram has went in apartments in Hinjawadi. And I can tell you, I have never seen anybody in the balcony. Nobody comes to the balcony. And earlier, in those days, while we were growing up, nobody used to be in the house. Everyone used to be in the balcony. In fact, you know, the neighbors would swap the kids. You know, करके बच्चे को यहाँ लेते थे, खेलते थे through the balconies like that. So nobody was willing to buy a TV. So it was mentioned, I don't know how much factual it is, but one person devotee was sharing this, that just to make this TV, increase the sales of TV, therefore they started making spiritual TV serials. And when I heard this, I was reflecting, I was, yes, I remember when we went to purchase our first Onida TV. And when we entered the showroom, and those days, 1991, there was no showrooms, there used to be small shops. I remember when I entered the Onida TV shop, everywhere there were TVs kept. And there was only one thing going on all the TVs, Ramayana. And today, around 2 years ago, I had to go and purchase one TV set for our center, display, not a TV set, one display screen. When I went to the Vijay Sales, you know, this local storeroom here, when I went there, he had hundreds of screens. And all of those 100 screens that had Hollywood movies playing. This is what has happened from 91, 92 to 2022. There was no Ramayana Mahabharata. And they got us hooked, or they made us purchase the TV serials or the TV sets through the spiritual programs. And later on, they stopped publishing spiritual programs and they brought this whole Western culture and whatnot. Nonetheless, the point here is that, in general, the Indians have this very strong spiritual fabric. So here, which is what is mentioned about this particular aspect, that, if you see, there are so many Bhagavad Sapta even happens today. And now those Bhagavad Saptas, which used to come on Atma or Sanskar TV, now they are there on YouTube. And sometimes when I access YouTube channel, what do you want to call it, YouTube, or on a browser, on TV, or on laptop or something, sometimes I have seen this Bhagavad Saptas going on, and there are as much as 20,000 people watching live. Even today there is so much craze for this thing, and those are 7-8 days Bhagavad Sapta which are going on morning till evening. There are many great speakers like that. So the point I'm trying to make is, this is what our culture is. Our mind are never satisfied completely. It's only possible in India, even up to today to some extent. So that's how this spiritual pleasure has been described. Even in spiritual pleasure, nobody is satisfied. The only difference is they want to hear more. In material life, they get frustrated and they want to change the subject. Whereas in spiritual subject, we still chant the same Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Do you know how Panchatattva mantra got introduced in ISKCON? Srila Prabhupada had only given Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And then at that point of time, the San Jose invitation came. Prabhupada went to San Jose. And Prabhupada was out for almost 3 to 4 months, something like that. And then when Prabhupada returned back to New York, so that time, first canto was already published. In first canto, you'll see at one place, Prabhupada writes about this particular, what is that? There is one particular mantra which Prabhupada says that we should not sing it. Something like that Prabhupada writes. Jai Jagadish, no, I don't know what is that. Huh? No. That's a Gayatri mantra. There is particular mantra which is for Krishna only. So the devotees saw that, and devotees thought, for a change, it will be good. Let us sing something else. So when Prabhupada came back to New York to receive Prabhupada, they were not chanting Hare Krishna Mantra. They all were chanting Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, something like that. This is Prabhupada mentioned in the first canto. And Prabhupada was surprised. So Prabhupada didn't say anything when he went to the temple. Then he asked, from where did you learn the shloka? And they all said, Prabhupada, he only wrote in the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada asked him, so why are you chanting this? I gave you Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So the disciples said, Prabhupada, we were feeling a little bored. We thought for a change, we should have another mantra. That time Prabhupada said, oh, that's the case? Let me give you a mantra which is more potent and which is totally offenseless. And for the first time, Prabhupada chanted then, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasati, Gaur Bhaktivinoda. That's how it came here. Anyways, let's continue. Just read the highlighted portion here.
But the beauty of the transcendental literatures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is that they never become old. They have been read in the world by civilized men for the last 5,000 years, and they have never become old.
So point is, yes, there is no satisfaction in spiritual life also, but we don't change our subject matter. In material life, person keeps on changing the subject matter. Please finish it.
They are ever fresh to the learned scholars and devotees, and even by daily repetition of verses of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no satiation for devotees like Vidura. Vidura might have heard the pastimes of Lord many, many times before he met Maitreya, but still he wanted the same narrations to be repeated because he was never satiated by hearing them. That is the transcendental nature of the Lord's glorious pastimes.
And the same point will repeat when after Vidura concludes speaking, Maitreya Muni begins to speak. Then Maitreya Muni glorifies Vidura's question. And the same point comes that Vidura, although he knew everything, yet he asked Maitreya Muni to speak. In fact, to some extent, if you see, Vidura knew even more than Maitreya Muni knew, because Vidura was a personal associate of Lord Shri Krishna. Maitreya Muni wasn't. Vidura had witnessed the Vrindavan pastime, Maitreya Muni did not. Yet Vidura asked, and there Prabhupada writes, this is the nature of a devotee's heart. He is always eager to hear about Krishna. So the quality of inquiry that we make, why the qualities of inquiry, for example, the inquiries of Parishit Maharaj are glorified, and why would the inquiries of Vidura would be glorified by Maitreya Muni? Our inquiry are dependent on, our inquiries are based on our absorption. What would be my absorption? According to that, we'll ask. If you see, go and meet somebody outside, generally those whose absorption is in totally material subject matter, the inquiry is generally about the welfare of their family or the welfare of their kids. Yes or no? Now, Vidura is not asking about anything about the welfare of the Kauravas or Pandavas, anything. He did ask how are they, but what is his inquiry in largely? He want to hear about Krishna. And similarly, Parishit Maharaj, he didn't ask Sukdev Goswami, is there a way how my life can be saved or something? He said, please tell me what is the duty of a dying man. It depends on our absorption, and it shows that these were totally absorbed in Krishna. Therefore, they could make an inquiry about Krishna like this. So let's go to text number 8, where now comes the question number 6, where another very interesting question being asked. Please describe in different planets why there are different living conditions on different planets. And this is your 5th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll give you some clues of it shortly. Let's take a look at the shloka. Yes, tattva bhede radhilokanatho lokan alokan saha lokapala achiklapadyatra hi sarvasatva Nikaya bhedo dikrita pratitaha. Yas tattva bhede radilokana. Krishna lokan alokan. Lokan means the higher planetary, alokan means the lower planetary system. Saha lokapal, and along with their respective kings. Kindly explain why so much variegatedness, why there are so many varieties been created in this material universe. Please read out the translation.
The Supreme King of all kings has created different planets and places of habitation, where living entities are situated in terms of the modes of nature and work, and he has created their different kings and rulers.
So in 5th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll find this discussion where our Parikshit Maharaj asked Sukdev Goswami, the 5th canto. I'll not go into the details of what the whole 5th canto is all about. 5th canto, I believe, had 24 chapters, 24 or 25 chapters, if I'm correct. And when the whole discussion about the 14 planetary system have happened, and then finally Sukdev Goswami glorifies Anantadev or Ananshesh, where he concludes that how he is the shelter of all shelter, and this whole material universe is kept on one of the hoods of Ananshesh like a mustard seed. Like that, the 23rd or 24th chapter ends. And then in the next chapter, Parishit Maha asked a question, which is exactly like this question. In fact, you can say the answer to this question is given there then. So question is asked by Parishit Maharaj to Sukdev Goswami, my dear Sukdev Goswami, I understand because of the different desires of a living entity, therefore Krishna has created this multifarious, multivariated living species, yonis, 8.4 million species. So those who cannot stop speaking, they have to nonetheless speaking, they have to speak nonetheless. So they're giving cow body, crow body. So they can sit on the veranda, keep doing cow like this. So different kinds of desires to be fulfilled, different kind of bodies have been provided. But my question to you is, why there is so much variegatedness in this whole planetary system? Why everything is not one? Why there is this lower planetary system, there is a Bhumandala, Karma Bhumi, then there is higher planetary system. And there Sukdev Goswami answers. And Sukdev Goswami says, yes, according to one's desires and karma, a living entity gets a particular body. However, every living entity functions according to the modes. And as we read in the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, according to the different modes, you get a different destination. So whatever the influence of modes on a living entity, to that influence, according to that, there is a particular destination created. And then Sukdev Goswami says, so those who perform pious activities, they go to Swarga and higher planet system. And those who perform impious activities, they go to Narkaloka. And then Parishit Maharaj asked, Narkaloka? You never explained me about Narkaloka, and therefore the 5th canto ends with the explanation of Narkaloka. Parishit said, is this Narkaloka that you're talking about, is it part of this universe? Is it outside of the universe? Or is it on this planet? Because you have not explained and you have given me the whole overview of this whole universe. Where does this hellish planet resides? That's how the fifth canto ends, where he describes the hellish planets. And the sixth canto begins with where Parishit, his heart full of compassion. My dear Sukdev Goswami, please show us the way how these conditioned living entities could be saved. That's why your sixth canto subject matter portion of. So that's the question being asked here, who looks like which is being answered in the fifth canto last chapter about why there are different planets and different places of habitation like that. And this is what Prabhupada writes in the purport, according to the modes. Please read out.
Lord Krishna is the chief king of all kings, and he has created different planets for all kinds of living entities. Even on this planet, there are different places for inhabitations by different types of men. There are places
1 second. Yeah. Go ahead.
There are places like deserts, islands, and valleys in mountainous countries, and in each of them there are different kinds of men born of different modes of nature according to their past deeds.
So this verse once again proves the compassionate nature of the Lord. That to what degree he is willing to do a hard work to fulfill the desires of the jivas of this world. Because this is what the desire want, this is what the jivas wanted. And to fulfill all those desires, Lord is willing to bring in so much variegatedness and create this complicated universe. So, like when you go to a market to purchase a product, you have a customer care department or you have a sales department, or let's say a customer care department. Krishna's customer care department is the best customer care department in the world because whatever you desire, Krishna has got it for you. And therefore, this whole world is full of this variegatedness. Again, this verse indicates that compassionate nature of the Lord. Let's read the last few lines.
In Bhagavad Gita, we find it said by the Lord that the living entities are sarvagata or present in every sphere of life.
This is mentioned in the second chapter. When the nature of the soul is being described, it is mentioned sarvagataha, which means everywhere. And Prabhupada gives an example. Sometimes you see on the top of a mountain, there is no green or nothing, greenery. And suddenly a flower plant flourishes from there. How many of you seen suddenly a roof in a building where there is nothing done and there is one grass comes out? That is what Sarvagata means. The living entity is all over the place. Go ahead.
So there is no doubt that on other planets there are also inhabitants like us, sometimes with greater intelligence and greater affluence. The living conditions for those of greater intelligence are more luxurious than on this earth. There are also planets where no sunlight reaches, and there are living entities who must live there due to their past deeds. All such plans for living in conditions are made by the Supreme Lord.
And Vidura requested Maitreya to describe this for the sake of further enlightenment. And now the ninth shloka, which brings in the seventh and the last question asked by Vidurji to Maitreya Muni. Please describe about the varieties in the jivas. Yena prajana utak atma karma rupa vidhana cha vidha vedatta Narayano Vishwasrak Atmayone Etachano Varnaya Vipravarya Yena Prajanam, Praja means population, Ut Atma Karma, by their own karma, Rupa Abhidhanam, form and feature. And Rupa means form and feature, Abhidhana means endeavors. Cha bhidam vedata, all this differentiation. Narayano Visvarg Atma Yone, this Narayana who is Atma Yoni is self-satisfied. Etat chano varanya vipravarya, please describe. Varanya means please describe, explain to me. Vipravarya, you are the chief among all the Brahmanas. Why Lord has created so many varieties of karmas, so many different varieties of forms and features and endeavors? Please describe. Although the Lord is self-satisfied, why is the Lord doing all this? And this is the concluding verse on the theme of this is all out of Lord's compassion. Three things. Why did Lord create it? Why does he maintains and destroys? Why did Lord brought about so much variegatedness into this creation? And why Lord have created so many varieties of forms? And Vidura concludes this section or his questions with saying that Krishna is Atman. Krishna is self-satisfied. Why would Krishna do all this endeavor? That's the reason we were talking about Krishna's compassion. It is only his causeless compassion which impelled him to do all this thing just to fulfill our foolish desires, all useless desires, because we want to be the controller, proprietor, enjoyer, and want to enjoy life after life. Just to fulfill that, Krishna have done so much. 8.4 million species, 14 planetary systems, and there are not one universe, unlimited universes with unlimited varieties. That's the point being highlighted here. Please read Chakravarti Thakur's translation.
Best of the Brahmanas, please describe how the Lord in the form of Brahma for creating the universe produces varieties of natures, activities, forms, and names for the jivas.
And here, Vidura requested to explain these differences between all the living creatures made by Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like that. And now, one other perspective of why Vidurji is requesting, because this is also a very important discussion amongst the materialists. Why there is so much differences? Why there are people with different skin color, with different level of intelligence, and different levels, different styles of physical form. And the people in the world are trying to bring in artificial equality. So this is one of the words that we can understand the Lord has created just to fulfill the desires of every living entity, which Maitri Muni would answer. And how much ever we talk about equality in the society, it can never be brought in because there are other set of people who are desiring for that inequality, of which Lord has already sanctioned like that. And now from 10th verse onwards, our discussion begins. This is the second section of this chapter, where now what are my expectations? In other words, Vidurji kind of explains after asking this question that, my dear Maitrimuni, my exclusive interest is only in Krishna Katha. Although I've asked this question, although I have heard about it also from none other than Srila Vyasdev, I know about Mahabharata also, but I would like to hear from you. Why? Because I was not satisfied then when Mahabharata was read or discussed as written by your dear friend Srila Vyasdev. I want you describe all these subject matters mixed with the glories of Krishna. So he sets his expectations straight in the verse number 10 to verse number 16. Viduji continues, and now Viduji says, Paravaresham Bhagavan Vratani Shrutani me Vyasa Mukhad Vishnam Atra Prunuma Shula Sukhavahana Deshavrate Krishna Katamritogha. So Maitri Muni, when he heard all this thing, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, Maitri Muni said to Vidura, hey Vidurji, haven't you heard all this thing in Mahabharata? And then Vidurji makes this statement to answer. What he says, Pare Varesham Bhagavad Vratani Shutani Me Vyasa Mukhad Abhisham. Yes, from the Mukha of Vyasadev, I have heard all this thing. Atra Panuma, but I was not satisfied. Shula Sukha Vahanam. However, I found very little happiness. Tesham Rate Krishna Katha Amrita Oghad. Why? Because that narration which was done by Srila Vyasdev was without the nectar of Krishna Katha. Therefore, although I heard it, yet I'm asking from you so that you describe all these questions in relation to Krishna. Please read the translation.
O my Lord, I have repeatedly heard about these higher and lower statuses of human society from the mouth of Vyasadev, and I have had enough of all these lesser subject matters and their happiness. They have not satisfied me with the nectar of the topics about Krishna.
And this is how Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur raises the question, as I said.
But you have heard
Um,
all of this in
So
Mahabharata.
prior to this verse was spoken, Maitreya Muni kind of, Vishwanath Thakur has a way of presenting a conversation very beautifully. He talks about what's happening in the mind like that. And this verse answers. So this indicates
This indicates whatever I have asked about you, you should speak about, but mixed with the sweetness of Krishna's pastime.
yes, I know of it. But now I want from you to speak to me, but in relation to Krishna, mixed with Krishna's pastimes. Why this is repeated again? This is the reason. And Maitreya said, well, you already know of it. And now Prabhupada has a very beautiful purport. Please read out.
Because people are very much interested in hearing social and historical presentations. Srila Vyasdev has compiled many books such as the Puranas and Mahabharata. These books are reading matter for the mass of people, and they were compiled with a view to reviving their God consciousness, now forgotten in the conditional life of material existence. The real purpose of such literature is not so much to present topics of historical references, but to revive the people's sense of God consciousness. For example, Mahabharata is the history of the battle of Kurukshetra, and common people read it because it is full of topics regarding the social, political, and economic problems of human society.
And Vidura had seen it all. He saw the molestation of Draupadi. He saw the abused, the attempts to kill Pandavas by Duryodhana and his party. He saw it all. He knew about the whole politics, economic problems, and whatnot. And Vidura is saying, I'm exasperated. I'm tired of it. I want to hear about Krishna. Yes, these questions, maybe I know the answer, but I would like you to tell me in relation to Krishna like that. So Vidura is explaining his position to Maitreya. Please go ahead.
Vidura explained to Maitreya his position of being fully satiated with the knowledge of mundane social and political topics and having no more interest in them. He was anxious to hear transcendental topics regarding Lord Sri Krishna. Because there were insufficient topics directly concerning Krishna in the Puranas, Mahabharata, etc., he was not satisfied and wanted to know more about Krishna.
Therefore, translation of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada made it as his life mission. Why? Because it is Srimad Bhagavatam. There are two things Prabhupada will write at the end of the purport. The two main texts, Bhagavad Gita, spoken by Krishna, Bhagavatam, about Krishna, exclusively about Krishna. In Puranas, as is mentioned, there is insufficient discussion about Krishna. In fact, if you read Padma Purana, things like this, you'll be confused who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes there's a discussion about Krishna, then there is about Vishnu, then there's Lord Shiva. Everyone is called Bhagavan. It's just like watching a Mahabharata serial and then you worry and then you wonder, is Shiva is the Lord or Krishna is the Lord? Who is the Lord like that? So therefore, Prabhupada gave so much importance to Srimad Bhagavatam because it exclusively speaks about Krishna. Topics are transcendental and there is no satiation in hearing about such topics. Please read next.
Vidura wanted to hear of everything from Maitreya, and so he inquired from him, but he desired that all the topics be in relationship with Krishna. As fire is never satisfied in its consumption of firewood, so a pure devotee of the Lord never hears enough about Krishna. Historical events and other narrations concerning social and political incidents all become transcendental as soon as they are in relationship with Krishna. That is the way to transform mundane things into spiritual identity. The whole world can be transformed into Vaikuntha if all worldly activities are dotted with Krishna Katha.
So, my little experience of discussing Bhagavad Gita has taught me one thing, which is almost similar to this. Whenever you start discussing with Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1 would have the maximum audience because it is all filled with the stories of Mahabharata. And then chapter 2, Shishyasya Sadimam Tuam Prapannam. When Arjuna surrenders, audience disappears. Then Karma Gyan, Karma Mishra, Bhakti, etc. comes. And it goes like a bouncer to them. And they don't understand what's going on. What happened to those stories were going on? Those good old days when, why Arjuna did this and all that. They're very happy. But by the time second, and particularly by the time third chapter starts, Tato Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, there are only sincere seekers remain. Artho, Arthati category all disappears. So this is the way to transform mundane things into spiritual identity. So it's about Mahabharata, how the mundane topics of politics, sociology are being transformed into spiritual subject matter. This is the point Prabhupada will make in the later purport just now. We'll read it. That's the purpose why Srila Vyasa composed Mahabharata. So those people who have no interest, at least those who are attracted to mundane topics, by hearing those mundane topics, but in relation to Krishna, would have some appreciation for Krishna like that. There are two important Krishna kathas in this world.
There are two important Krishna Kathas current in the world, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita is Krishna Katha because it is spoken by Krishna, whereas Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna Katha because it narrates about Krishna. Lord Chaitanya advised all his disciples to preach Krishna Katha all over the world without discrimination, because the transcendental value of Krishna Katha can purify one and all from material contamination.
So Maitreya Muni said, Hey Vidura, but you have heard enough about Krishna. Then Vidura answers in 11th verse. Kastrapyunatit padho vidhana satreshu vasuribhir idyamana ya karnanadim purushasya yato Bhava pradam geharatam chinnati. Bhava pradham geharatam chinnati. So he says, now Vidura says why he wants to hear Krishna Katha, although he knows. Kastrapyanath, which man, Tripti, will be satisfied? Tit padho abhidhanat, from the talks of the Supreme Personality Godhead. Satreshu va suribhi idyamanat. If there is an opportunity to hear from a great devotee like you about Krishna, which man will be satisfied? Yah karnanadim. Karnanadim refers to the ears. Purashyato, where we have got the opportunity to hear, to enter the Hari Katha through the ears, through the holes of the ear. What it does? First, which man would be ever satisfied because the bliss increases? And second, what does this Krishna Katha do? Bhava pradam geh ratim chinnati. Chinnati. Hard dena. Destroys. What it destroys? Geha rati. Rati means attachment. Towards what? Geha. Geha is what? Graha. Graha is the home. Graha, grahani, like that. So your attachment to Geha, your attachment to house, home is destroyed. And Bhava Pradam, Bhava Rog, repeated birth and death. Bhava Pradam, and it delivers you or saves you from the repeated birth and death. Therefore, hey Maitreya Muni, I want to hear Krishna Katha. Please read the translation. Oh, let's have somebody online, if just to know that online devotees are there. Anyone online devotee would like to hear, please? Oh, sorry, read, please. Read the translation. You can unmute, or I don't know how to do it. They can unmute themselves, right? Yeah, so you can unmute and speak up.
Who in human society can be satisfied without hearing sufficient talk of the Lord, whose lotus feet are the sum total of all places of pilgrimage, and who is worshipped by great sages and devotees? Such topics can cut off one's bondage to family affection simply by entering the holes.
Very, very important shloka, and to that degree, a very important purport. So I'll repeat again 3 things which Vidurji mentions, and then you will read the purport and you'll see how Prabhupada develops this beautiful purport and has an instruction for all of us. So 3 things Vidurji says, what happens by hearing Krishna Katha: deep satisfaction, deep detachment from the house, breaks family bonds, and third, freedom from material life. So by hearing Krishna Katha like this, an individual is benefited. Therefore, Prabhupada writes in the purport, preaching Krishna consciousness is the highest philanthropic work. because that is what brings success to a life of an individual. Let's see Prabhupada purport. Please read, Prabhu. Swayam Bhagavan Prabhu, I guess you were reading, right? Please go ahead. The highlighted portions.
Krishna Katha is so powerful that simply by entering into a person's ear, it can at once give deliverance from the bondage of family affection. Family affection is an illusory manifestation of the external energy, and it is the only impetus for all mundane activities.
And then Prabhupada writes, as long as you're attached to it, repeated birth and death, and it is influenced by the modes of material nature. And then Prabhupada says, the best among the fools. Who are the best fools? Let's read. Please read out.
The best among the fools who are thus deluded are those who engage in altruistic activities
Means charitable activities. Altruistic means charitable activities.
under the spell of the material mode of passion.
Continue the next line.
Lord Gita, which is direct Krishna Katha, gives humanity the elementary lesson that the body is perishable and that the consciousness which is spread throughout the body is imperishable.
So all this charitable organization providing clothes, food, shelter, etc. purposes is under the mode of passion. And those who are identifying with the body or attached to the family is under the mode of ignorance. Anyone who misunderstands, please go ahead.
Anyone who misunderstands this perishable body to be the self and who works for it in the name of sociology, philanthropy, altruism, nationalism, or internationalism under the false plea of the bodily conception of life is certainly a fool and does not know the implications of reality and unreality.
So here Prabhupada is building the gradations of how the society is divided. And then Prabhupada says, above this people affected by ignorance and passion, there are people who are situated in goodness. But even this mundane goodness is always contaminated by tinges of ignorance and passion. Prabhupada says, is with an understanding that body is different than the self. However, but being contaminated, such people who are situated in goodness cannot understand the real nature of the self as a person. In other words, Prabhupada is indicating about Mayavadis. And such people who are situated in mode of goodness, they develop an impersonal conception. Prabhu, please read out this.
Their impersonal conception of the self as distinct from the body keeps them in the mode of goodness within material nature. And unless they are attracted by Krishna Katha, they will never be liberated from the bondage of material existence.
Okay, so now Prabhupada have built up the discussion how there are people in mode of ignorance, mode of passion, mode of goodness. And all three of them are bewildered. And now Prabhupada says the importance of Krishna Katha. Very beautiful and important lines. Please read out.
Krishna Katha is the only remedy for all people of the world because it can situate one in pure consciousness of the self and liberate one from material bondage. To preach Krishna Katha all over the world, as recommended by Lord Chaitanya, is the greatest missionary activity, and all sensible men and women of the world may join in this great movement started by Lord Chaitanya.
And we already read about how Prabhupada glorified, when Vidurji said, what is the job profile of a sadhu? By his causeless mercy, anugrahaya charanti pumsam, he travels all over the place to distribute Krishna's mercy. So when Vidura said so far, Vidurji was was like, what did I say? I'm talking to Maitri Muni. Maitri Muni and Vyasadeva are very good friends. If in future Maitri Muni and Vyasadeva meets and Maitri Muni would, if happen to talk to Vyasadeva and tells him that, one point of time I met with Vidura and Vidura said, your whole Mahabharata is bogus. It just talks about mundane, social, politics, etc. topics. There is no Krishna Katha discussion. Then Vidura thought, how bad Vyasadevji would feel. So just to patch up the previous verse that he said, you see this one? He said, I am not satisfied. Yes, I have heard, but I am not satisfied. I have heard from the mouth of Vyasadeva, but I am not satisfied. Why? Because he did not speak enough about Krishna. So now to do a patch up, so that, if in case Maitri Muni meets Vyasadeva, who happens to be a good friend, then at least Maitri Muni would say, although he said you did not talk enough, but he also said, why you created Mahabharata. So this is the verse, very important verse, where in text number 12, our Vidurji describes why Vyasadevji created Mahabharata. What was the purpose behind? And here it is mentioned, he's your good friend. Munir vivakshu bhagavat gunanam sakha pite bharatam aha Krishna. Sakhapi, your friend. Bharatam aha Krishna. The Mahabharat he has described. And Krishna here, Prabhupada is Vyasadeva. Your friend has described Mahabharat. We'll take a look at it in a short while. Let's continue the verse. Yasmin Ranam Gramya Sukhanuvade Matir Gaheta Nuhare Kathayam. I offer my respectful obeisances to your dear friend Srila Vyasadeva. Munir Vivakshur Bhagavad Gunanam. The one who has all the transcendental qualities. He has described Bharatam Aha Krishna. Krishna means Vyasadeva here has described Mahabharat. But for what? Yasmin Nirnam Grame Sukhanuvade. For the common man. Gramya Katha. Those who have a lot of interest in mundane topics. Who get Sukhanuvade. Who finds pleasure hearing the mundane topics. For them, Mahabharata has been composed. But for me, Mate Grahitanu Hare Kathayam. My Mati finds no shelter in Mahabharata. Matir Grahitanu Hare Kathayam. My attention, at least here it is mentioned, Mati Grahitanu Hare Kathayam. It has been done to attract the attention Hare Kathayam. Why it has been done? So that their attention can be attracted to Hari Kathayam, towards the words of Lord Shri Krishna. And what are the words of Lord Shri Krishna in Mahabharata? Bhagavad Gita. So that people can understand Bhagavad Gita, therefore this whole Mahabharata has been composed. Another way is, my heart does not get attracted to these topics. I want to hear Hari Katha like that. Please read out the translation. Okay, online. Anyone from online or devotees would like to read? Can please go ahead and read out the translation, both of Prabhupada and Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur.
Your friend, the great sage Krishna Dvaipanya Vyasa, has already described the transcendental qualities of the Lord in his great work, the Mahabharata. But the whole idea is to draw the attention of the mass of people to Krishna Katha, Bhagavad Gita, through their strong affinity for hearing mundane topics. O sage,
Sorry, go ahead.
O sage, your friend Vedavyas, desiring to describe the qualities of the Lord, wrote Mahabharata. In that work, he attracted men's attention to topics of the Lord through the topics about material happiness.
The essence Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes is also the topics of Krishna. Like that, he speaks about it. The minds of men absorbed in material pleasure became controlled by Vyasa through stories about Artha and Kama, in order that their minds enter into sections such as Bhagavad Gita and Narayaniya. So this particular line, which is this, Matir Grahita nu Hare Kathayam, for this is the purpose Srila Vyasadeva composed. And if in case we want to know what is the perspective of Srila Prabhupada on Mahabharata, this is the purport. We can read this whole purport actually. We'll get a clarity on what Prabhupada and how Prabhupada saw Mahabharata and Mahabharata's contribution. Please, Prabhu, read out this whole purport.
The great sage Krishna Dvaipanya Vyasa is the author of all Vedic literature, of which his works Vedanta Sutra, Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata are very popular readings. As stated in Bhagavatam 1.4.25, Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Mahabharata for the less intelligent class of men, who take more interest in mundane topics than in the philosophy of life. The Vedanta Sutra was compiled for persons already above the mundane topics, who might already have tasted the bitterness of the so-called happiness of mundane affairs. The first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra is Athato Brahma Jigyasa, that is, only when one has finished the business of mundane inquiries in the marketplace of sense gratification can one make relevant inquiries regarding Brahman, the transcendence. Those persons who are busy with the mundane inquiries which fill the newspapers and other such literatures are classified as Stri Sudra Dvija Bandhus or women, the laborer class, and unworthy sons of the higher class, Brahmana, Kshatriya, and
Here it is. Yeah, continue.
Such less intelligent men cannot understand the purpose of Vedanta Sutra, although they may make a show of studying the sutras in a perverted way. The real purpose of Vedanta Sutra is explained by the author himself in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and anyone trying to understand Vedanta Sutra without reference to Srimad Bhagavatam is certainly misguided. Such misguided persons who are interested in the mundane affairs of philanthropic and altruistic work under the misconception of the body as the self could better take advantage of the Mahabharata, which was specifically compiled by Srila Vyasdev for their benefit.
So it is for the less intelligent people for whom. So Prabhupada concludes this. Please read out the last few lines. That Vyasadev had no interest actually, but he
Srila
did it
Vyasdev,
out of his anukampa, out of his causeless compassion. Go ahead.
Srila Vyasdev had no interest in writing a history of mundane activities other than to give less intelligent persons a chance for transcendental realization through Bhagavad Gita. Vidura's reference to the Mahabharata indicates that he had heard of the Mahabharata from Vyasadev, his real father, while he was away from home and was touring the places of pilgrimage.
Hare Krishna. So like that, this is mentioned. So Maitri Muni had a question, kind of, again indicated in the sense where he kind of indicated to what would you gain by hearing about Krishna Katha? And to that answer, Vidurji speaks this very beautiful verse. Sa shraddhanasya vivardhamana viraktimanyatra karoti pumsa Hare padanusmriti nivratasya samasta dukkhapayama shuddhate. So Sashraddhanasya Vivardhamana, one who is very eager with faith to hear about Krishna, what happens? Viraktimanyatra karoti pumsa, he develops detachment. Hare padanusmriti nirvratasya, and one who is such engaged or in the constant remembrance of the Supreme Personality Godhead, nirvratasya, what he attains? He attains transcendental bliss and samasta dukkhapayama shuddhate, and he becomes freed from all kind of sufferings and misery. Therefore, hey Maitreya Muni, I would like to hear about Krishna Katha. Please narrate. Please read out the translation.
For one who is anxious to engage constantly in hearing such topics, Krishna Katha gradually increases his indifference toward all other things. Such constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna by the devotee who has achieved transcendental bliss vanquishes all his miseries without delay.
So, okay. So here Prabhupada makes a very beautiful point in the purport. Krishna Katha is not different than associating with Krishna. The famous example, Nasingha Mehta, a famous devotee of the Lord from Gujarat, how his wife was kind of behind Nasingha Mehta to get their daughter married. And finally, when marriage was arranged, they had no wealth. So the wife asked, requested Nasingha Mehta, go and beg, arrange some wealth from somewhere so our daughter can be married. So Nasingha Mehta went away. And when he went away to a different village, there was Bhagavad Sapta was going on. So he thought, let me hear for some time. And when Bhagavad Sapta will end, or maybe at the end of day today, I'll go back. And he became so absorbed when finally Bhagavad Sapta ended and the stage was dismantled and the whole platform was removed. Or finally people came and said, Arey Baba, hato, yahan kyo baithe ho? Then he woke up and he was like, came under an external consciousness. He said, oh, really? Whole Bhagavad Sapta ended? What happened? What happened? And then he asked, what day it is? And it was almost 2 to 3 days later than the marriage date, which means the date for marriage has already passed away. And as all of you probably familiar with, Nasingha Mehta was full of anxiety. He came back. He's like, my dear Lord, you only have to save me. And he was thinking his wife is really gonna thrash him this time. And when he entered the village, everyone in the village was glorifying him. Wow, Nasingha Mehta, kya shadi kari hui? Bahut badhiya. So Nasingha Mehta was confused. Whose marriage are they talking about? I'm worried if my daughter got married also or not. And when he entered the house, first time with a big smile. She was very proud of her husband. Singh Mehta, "Arey, where were you? Didn't had your breakfast and lunch? Had been away for so while." Singh Mehta said, "First of all, you tell me what happened to my daughter's marriage." "Oh, you only brought in so much wealth, so wonderful arrangements. You gave so much charity and gift to everyone." And then Singh Mehta understood, oh, that should be Krishna. Anyways, the point here is certainly know that on the absolute point, Krishna Katha and Krishna are one and same. So Prabhupada makes a very beautiful point about reading Bhagavad Gita. Please read this highlighted part.
Bhagavad Gita being spoken by the Lord is as good as the Lord himself.
What it means is as good as the Lord himself, which means when we are reading, I heard it from one of my seniors long ago, this was back in America, who taught me Bhagavad Gita. He said, how we should read Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is a special dialogue that is happening between you and Krishna. When you're reading Bhagavad Gita, you should not read Arjuna Vacha, you should read your Vacha. You're asking a question to Krishna. And Krishna is talking to you, because message spoken by Lord is as good as the Lord himself, which means we are in direct union with Krishna. And it should be read and understood that way. Then it becomes practical. And then what happens when a person reads Bhagavad Gita? Read ahead.
When a sincere devotee reads Bhagavad Gita, this is as good as seeing the Lord face to face in his personal presence. But this is not so for the mundane wranglers. All the potencies of the Lord are there when one reads Bhagavad Gita, provided it is read in the way recommended in the Gita by the Lord himself.
So how many of you had read Bhagavad Gita before or had an understanding before? If in case you would have an understanding before reading Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, you would see one point that you would say about Bhagavad Gita is Bhagavad Gita is the most complicated book of this world. And if in case you read, of course, all of you would have read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and once you read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, you will say Bhagavad Gita is the most easiest book to understand. Why? Because in the very first purport, first chapter, first verse, first line only, Prabhupada writes something very incredible. I'll show you something. I don't know how much you paid attention what Prabhupada writes in the very first line. It's always interesting to see the first line or the first purport. So please pay attention what Prabhupada writes. Right? What is this? How do I go? Yeah, here. Please read this up to here. Just read out what Prabhupada writes. How does Prabhupada opens Bhagavad Gita, Dhritarashtra Uvacha?
Bhagavad Gita is the widely read atheistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya, glorification of the Gita.
Which is by Shankaracharya, not the Padma Puran Gita Mahatmya. Shivan Parvati conversation. That's not the one. Go ahead.
There it says that one should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna and try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations.
So who should be reading this Bhagavad Gita? You should not be reading it by yourself. You should study Bhagavad Gita under the guidance of a bona fide teacher. First of all, Prabhupada says, hey, you opened the book, wait a second. Do you have a bona fide teacher? If not, close the book. You cannot understand it, because you're going to read it with your own motivated interpretation. Then the example.
The example of clear understanding is there in the Bhagavad Gita itself, in the way the teaching is understood by Arjuna, who had the Gita directly from the Lord. If someone is fortunate enough to understand Bhagavad Gita in the line of disciplic succession without motivated interpretation, then he surpasses all studies of Vedic wisdom and all scriptures of the world.
And Prabhupada says, one will find in Bhagavad Gita all that is contained in other scriptures. Like that, Prabhupada says. So how it has to be studied? Under the guidance. And then it becomes clear. For in our case, we read Prabhupada's commentary, which means reading under a pure devotee like that. So that's how it makes a difference. So when so many times we say, our Bhagavad Gita has brought about transformation. This is a statement that Prabhupada is making. Why Prabhupada's writing has brought about transformation? Because we are hearing from a bona fide, that forum like that. So all the potencies of the Lord are there when one reads Bhagavad Gita like this. One cannot foolishly manufacture. And the last few lines of the purport.
Only the devotee, by his factual experience, can understand the import of this verse spoken by Vidura. The pure devotee of the Lord enjoys life by constantly remembering the lotus feet of the Lord, by hearing Krishna Katha. For such a devotee, there is no such thing as material existence. And the much advertised bliss of Brahmananda is like a fig for the devotee who is in the midst of the transcendental ocean of bliss.
Hare Krishna. So like this, Viduji speaks in the verse number 13, and now in verse number 14, Viduru Viduji criticizes all those who do not like to hear Krishna Katha. Tan socha socha navido anusoche. Pitiable and more pitiable are all those who do not like to hear Krishna Katha. Hare Kathaya Vimukha Naghena. Vimukha. They are detached. In other words, they have not detached, they're averse to Hari Katha. And why they are detached to Hari Katha? Aghena, because of their sinful activities. Aghena, because of the sinful activities, they cannot develop taste for Hari Katha. Shinoti Devo Animishastu Esham. शीनोती मतलब शीन हो जाना, कम हो जाना, देवो अनिमिषेस्तु येषाम, because they do not hear Krishna Katha. Krishna in a Kal factor diminishes their life force. Ayuvarthavad gati smritina. And like that, their ayu is reduced, varthavada, and they waste their time in useless philosophical discussions, gati smritinam, or performing some useless rituals, and they waste their human form of life. Please read the translation.
O sage, persons who, because of their sinful activities, are averse to the topics of transcendence and thus ignorant of the purpose of the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, are pitied by the pitiable. I also pity them because I see how their duration of life is spoiled by eternal time while they involve themselves in presentations of philosophical speculation, theoretical ultimate goals of life, and different modes of rituals.
So why people don't find attraction for Krishna Katha is because of aghena, sinful activities. And such people find a lot of attraction for internet surfing or Facebook surfing, right? So aghena, they can spend their countless time. All of us have an experience when you talk to people outside and tell them, okay, come for a program. They say, samay nahi hai. As the same person who is saying samay nahi hai spends countless hours on surfing through internet, on social media apps and whatnot. The reason is sinful activities. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada didn't start preaching with Bhagavad Gita class. Srila Prabhupada first created an environment where they can be purified to attend the class. And what he gave, the whole movement began with Kirtan and Prasad. Kirtan, who doesn't like dance and singing? And Prasad, of course, Prasad Sarva Dukkha Nam. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, after all. you know, so who doesn't like Krishna Prasad? So Prabhupada got them hooked to what? Kirtan and Prasad. What was the life in those days? 8 to 10 hours devotees used to go out for Harinam Sankirtan. This is before the book distribution started. And then when book distribution started, then Sankirtan took another shape. Otherwise, in their white bed sheets, sorry, not white, the orange bed sheets wrapped around their body, the young hippies were out on the street for 8 to 10 hours chanting, doing Kirtan. That purified them. And then Prabhupada had an elaborate and fabulous Sunday feast. You cannot even imagine what Sunday feast used to be there that time. You know, at least 4 to 5 varieties of sweets. Now you can imagine how many sabjis items would be there when you have this many varieties of sweets like this. So what was the way Prabhupada got them into? Through Kirtan and Prasadam, purified the consciousness, and when they were a little stable, then Prabhupada gave them philosophy. And that's the reason that's a cue here, why people are not attracted because of their sinful activities. So here Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes something very interesting. He says there are 3 types of people related topics of Lord. One, who are faithful. Second, who are faithless. Third, those who are opposed. And then Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur gives the definition of those who are faithful like that. And then he says, those who are faithful, bhakti, what is a faithful means? Faithful person means for whom bhakti is the only process for achieving the highest spiritual goal. Now, very interesting here, actually. Now, however, who desire artha, dharma, kama, moksha without bhakti are the opposers. Faithful, faithless, and opposers. So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says the faithful are described here with joy. Those who are faithless, they are not only discussed. But when Vidura is saying pitied, those who are pitied by pitied, are the opposers who are lamented. And who are the opposers? These are Mayavadis. And that's the reason when you read Ishopanishad, among the Mayavadis and atheists, who is sent to a more darker hell? Atheists or Mayavadis? Mayavadis. So who are being opposed here, who are being lamented by Vidurji here is Mayavadi, like that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And Prabhupada also makes the same point. Though they study the scriptures, they do not understand the final meaning. They oppose the Lord's topic because of great offense, agena, either recent or ancient, like that. Please read the purport. Very beautiful purport.
According to the modes of material nature, there are three kinds of relationship between human being and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are in the modes of ignorance and passion are averse to the existence of God, or else they formally accept the existence of God in the capacity of an order supplier. Above them are those who are in the mode of goodness. The second class of men believe the
So
Supreme.
this has been discussed before also. Ignorance and passion and goodness, Prabhupada indicates here those who are believers in impersonalism, like that. Let's come to the concluding part here. Let's read this last few lines.
According to this class of men who are situated in pure devotion service to the Lord, the highest goal of human life is Purushartha.
Purusharth. The
Devotion.
actual meaning of Purusharth, Prabhupada says, is bhakti, not
Devotion.
dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Like that. Go ahead. The impersonalists.
The impersonalists, because they engage in mental speculation and have no faith in the personality of Godhead, have no business hearing the topics of Krishna. Such persons are pitiable for the first class pure devotees of the Lord. The pitiable impersonalists pity those who are influenced by the modes of ignorance passion. But the pure devotees of the Lord take pity on them both, because both waste their most valuable time in the human form of life in false pursuits, sense gratification, and mental speculative
So
presentations.
Mayavadi says these sense gratifiers are useless. And devotee says Mayavadi and sense gratifier both are useless. That is the point in essence Prabhupada is making here. Let's come to the next verse. We'll take two more shlokas and we'll pause for today. Tadasya kausarva sharmadatu. Kausharva refers to a matrimony. Therefore, I request you to please tell me Krishna Katha. Why? Sharmadatu. Sharmadatu means it awards all the good fortune. Hare Katham eva Katha. Because Hari Katha is the sar of all kathas, is the essence of all. Vedaischa sarve aham eva vedya vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. Udhratya pushpebhe ivarta bandhu. No, this is not the right way. Udhratya pushpebhe ivarta bandhu. Shivaya na kirtaya tirtha kirti. Ivarta bandhu means bandhu, which means who are distressed. You are a friend of the distressed. Shivaya na kirtaya tirtha kirti. Unless you describe the glories of the Lord, they cannot be any good for anyone. Please read out the translation.
O Maitreya, O friend of distress, the glories of the human all over the world. Therefore, just as bees collected honey from flowers, kindly describe the essence of all topics, the topics of the Lord.
And like this, Viduji concludes here. Prabhupada writes, it is the same purport as we discussed from the second canto, first chapter, verse number 2. The mundane people have all the subject matter to discuss like that. They have no taste for hearing Krishna Katha like that. Finally, in the 16th verse, now Maitri Muni is about to speak. But Maitri Muni is confused. इतना सारा क्वेश्चन पूछ लिया, किसका जवाब दूं पहले? Imagine if you're giving a class and somebody asks you 3 questions straight. Then you say, wait a second, go by one. And Viduji have asked 7 questions, not one. So Maitreya Muni is kind of confused. Kiska answer do pehle? So Viduji, seeing that condition, himself speaks and gives a hint to Maitreya Muni what he should start speaking first. This is the verse about it. Sa Vishwa Janma Sthiti Samyamarthe Krithavatara pragarita shaktihi. Chakara karmanyati purushanani. Yani shvara kirtayatani mahiyam. So please, showing kindness to me, please read out Vaishnava Chakravarti's translation.
Showing kindness to me, please describe how the Supreme Lord, endowed with power, having already appeared as the Purushas for creating, maintaining, and destroying the universe, perform superhuman action.
So whom should answer first about? Purushartha. So which means first discuss about Sarga and Visarga. And then Vishnu Chakravarti says, then in detail describe about the avatars of Krishna, says things should end in sweetness. So right now you may speak about little technical subject, but then speak about the Leela avatars. So our conversation ends in sweetness. Like this, the discussion. We can read the purport and conclude for today.
Vidura was undoubtedly very eager to hear about Lord Krishna in particular, but he was overwhelmed because Lord Krishna had just passed away from the visible world. He therefore wanted to hear about him in his Purusha incarnation, which he manifested with full potencies for the creation and maintenance of the cosmic world. The activities of the Purusha incarnation are but the extension of the activities of the Lord. The hint was given by Vidura to Maitreya because Maitreya could not decide which part of the activities of Lord Krishna should be chanted.
Therefore, Vidura gave a hint. Please begin to speak about Purushartha. So with this, we come to a conclusion. We'll read how Maitri Muni responds to Vidura tomorrow. In today's discussion, we saw Vidurji asking 7 questions to Maitri Muni. The first question, please describe about what can give us real happiness. Second question, give me instruction on how to please the Supreme Lord. Third, narrate the pastimes of Purusha avatars, which means Sarga Visarga here. Fourth, how does Lord manifest himself in nature, which means Virat Roop? Fifth, please speak about Leela Avtaras. Sixth, why there are different living conditions on different planets. As I said, that will be discussed in the 5th canto. Could be answered here also, but we see the dedicated discussion. And the 7th question today, which was asked by Vidurji to Maitri Muni, why there are so many varieties of living entities. And to conclude with, Vidurji said, only Krishna Katha can satisfy my heart. Krishna Katha is all auspicious. Kindly narrate to show kindness to the living entities of this world. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Hare Krishna. सभी ऑनलाइन भक्त का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. आप लोग कैसे 3 घंटे ऑनलाइन बैठ के सुन सकते हैं, ये अपने में ही चमत्कार है. ये भगवान की असीम कृपा का उदाहरण है कि आप लोग अभी भी जाग रहे हैं. This is another example of Lord's unfathomable compassion to those who are sitting here. They have been through different leelas of creation, maintenance, and destruction in their consciousness. But all of you still, I see all of your eyes are still awake. Your eyes are still open. So thank you all so much for giving your kind attention, and kindly forgive me if there was some misgiving or something I said wrong. Hare Krishna. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.